Bloody 10 past 9 here.
You're on daylight saving time in Mirrabah.
Oh yes, that's right.
Okay,
Mmm.
we're all set here. We've just had the lovely meal prepared by Pauline.
Can we just have an ad for Sarah Lee cake?
Cheeky bugger.
Pauline, you're being recorded, do you?
No, just too bad.
You want to cut out that
Right.
sanguinary language.
Now, we're not here for long. Jimmy's only... Oh, it's an epic.
We're not here for long.
Mm.
All right.
That's very nice.
Okay, Jim.
Righto. What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about, first of all, the George family.
Oh, shit. Sorry. Can you
This is for this is for prosperity, for, generations, my children's children, and...
They'll say he was a dirty old bloke. He said a naughty word. So don't show it to anybody under the age of 18.
No.
Can we
That's
think...
good. Okay.
Well, the gaffer has just had to change his R. So anyhow,
Delete that.
without further ado...
Without further ado.
What we...
The George family.
What we'd like you to start out, Uncle Jim.
Yes. Call
Yes.
me Jim, don't call me Uncle.
No,
Make me
excuse
feel
me.
old. Oh yes, Uncle Jim, right.
You are my Uncle
Oh, that's
Jim.
part of yeah, that's right. That's right.
The floor manager's sitting over there and doing her job
Yes,
quite
yes,
well.
indeed, I see that.
Pauline,
Yeah.
and who is coming into the picture shortly. I think really, in one, I suppose, aspect of the George life that us as children
Still a bit
of
frozen, Martin.
the Georges
Yeah.
didn't really get,
Lovely.
haven't really come to know too much about is the real early life of the Georges as you and your brothers and sisters as kids. And what's your earliest memory,
And first of all,
really?
whereabouts do you come in the family, Jim?
I come third last.
Right, now, name the family from top to bottom.
Brother Bill,
When was he born?
born in 1907. The twins, Molly, your mother was the older of the two by 20 minutes, I believe. I wasn't there, but she was the older of the two.
I heard it was 3
and
minutes.
3 minutes, could have been.
Was it?
Could have been. That would be your mother's version. And really, Molly was the older of the two, and then naturally Nancy, 1909, 1911, Eileen, 1913, Agnes, 1915, Nellie, 1900, and then we come to, all the odds, and in more ways than one. They were the odd members of the family, 7, 9, 11, 13, and then came the even members. Jimmy, Nellie, we've covered Nellie. Jim, the 4th of January 1916, Dark, 1918, Eva, 1920. So the whole gang was spread from 1907 to 1920.
And I believe that Grandma Geordie, your mum, was 28 when she got married or something? Well, no, your dad. Your dad was, how old was he when he got married?
He'd have been more than that.
Well, actually,
He was older than that, because
how old
it was certainly quick work for him, wasn't it?
Yes. He didn't waste any time at
No,
all.
wham bam, thank you man, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
How old was your father then? When was he our grandfather?
Now, what was his name?
William George.
Right.
Now,
When was he born, do you think? Can you remember when he was with you?
No, he was 63 when he died, and he died in 1930.
Right.
So,
So 1867 he was born.
Born, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how old was he when he got married?
He would have been, give or take a few years, 40, 30, 30.
He was in his late
35 or
30s, I
so.
think.
Mm.
Yes. 35 to 40.
So how old was Auntie Eve when he died? Oh, when did he die?
He died in 1930.
Oh, yeah, so she was 10.
She was
She was
She was
10.
10.
Mm.
10, how long ago? Oh, yes, fair enough.
Oh,
He
right.
had
Yeah.
Huntington's disease, didn't he? Didn't he have Huntington's disease?
To be perfectly frank, I don't know
I
quite.
think that's what he had.
Eventually caused his death, but he did, back when we lived in Brunswick, Davy Street, Brunswick, that was the house in which I was born. I was born in the front room of 110 Davy Street, as it was then. Now I think 52, 56, they renumbered for some reason renumbered the two streets,
Mhm.
and it changed, as I say, from 110, but it was in 110 Davy Street that I was born. I don't know how many more of the children. I didn't know until I got a
Birth certificate.
birth certificate to go to get a passport, and I realised then my place of birth was not Vaucluse Hospital as I'd always imagined, but in the front room of 110 Davy Street.
Is that what it had on your birth certificate? The front room?
It didn't have the front room, but I did think that it could have been the front room, since there were only two other rooms and there were about 7
Was it a Victorian
kids in
house?
what's
Would it have been a Victorian house?
In
when you
design.
say Victorian.
In architecture?
In architecture?
Uh,
Because in Victorian houses, they only used to let the visitors in the front room.
Yes, that's right. No, there was one passageway down, and then the front bedroom, the second bedroom, the
Yeah.
third room, and then a dining room.
Yeah, it sounds like a
Yeah,
Victorian house.
kitchen, yes. With a quince tree
Victorian
in the
cottage.
backyard that spread over
So
about 3 blocks.
what are your memories of that front room when you
When you arrived.
when you arrived?
Well, I haven't any clear memories.
What were the cornices like?
I can remember my mother sighing deep down saying, "Bugger it all, it's another redhead." I heard her
didn't-
say that.
She
Yes.
did she cry
She did.
like my mother did when
Oh, yes,
I was
yes,
born, saying
absolutely.
another bloody redhead?
Yeah, that's right. Another redhead.
So, moving right along, Jim, what's your earliest memory of life?
Well, it was a strange thing, Kev, that I had a cousin, and his name was Mick Powell. Went to the war, and
This is the
Yeah.
First World War.
this is the First World War. Now, at the end of the war, I was only nearly 3, I suppose. But, I can clearly recollect describe him standing in the kitchen, smoking a pipe, how he stood, how he was dressed. My mother always said, impossible. But it is clear in my memory, that was my first memory.
Mm.
But Eva has a better memory of later years, for instance, when we left Brunswick, sometime in the 20s. She was 8, she said, so we'd say it was 1928, 1928 or so. I would then have been, 12. But my memories of the whole thing back in those days are rather, my father used to ride a heavy green coloured bike, and he'd come home each evening, and there would be in his pocket a sandwich I don't know why I should have been the special or whether I was the hungry one, but there was always a sandwich, and that is a clear recollection. Another clear recollection of my
What was on
father
the sandwich?
is, pardon?
What, was it the same sandwich?
The same kind of sandwich, let us say. But another clear recollection was my father taking Dark and I to the circus, which was on up the Sydney Road, on the corner of Sydney Road and our street, Davy Street. And I can remember wondering for years why he took us into he gave us the tickets, he gave us money to spend, threepence to spend, and then he went home. And he came back and he picked us up. And I always wonder why. And Dark, who was 3 years younger than I, he said to me one day, "Did you ever wonder why the old man," as he called him, the old man,
What did you call him?
I call him Dad,
Right,
always,
yeah.
yes. Dad and Mum. They used to call her Mummy. Mummy, as you know, only too well.
Mm.
My mummy and my daddy.
Mm.
But Dark said, many years later, he said, "Did you ever wonder?" I said, "Yes, I have wondered for years." And he said, he just didn't have the money. It was depression time, he just didn't have the money.
Mm.
And you know, I have often thought back and thought of my father in terms of you know, what he did do, and at the time I may have criticised it, but I found now it was beyond criticism. He was really a fairly a clever kind of bloke. He was only a labourer, but I think he had quite a good intellect.
So how old were you when he died?
I was 14.
Right.
Mm.
And I mean, what's your recollection of him? I mean, what when you said you were critical of him, was he a loving person? I mean, did he ever tell you that he loved you?
No, no,
Did he ever
Of course
tell
he
any of the
don't.
girls?
no, I don't. He wouldn't have told anybody. He wouldn't have told any of the children.
Mm.
He didn't show them affection. But then
Do you think that was, Jimmy, because of the
The
environment, the time,
The
it was pretty
time,
tough
exactly,
times,
the
and
time,
really
exactly.
there wasn't much room for that sort of.
I doubt very much whether many fathers and mothers did.
Yeah.
They might have shown love,
Mm.
but I don't think they expressed it in words. I don't think so.
Which
I
I
think
suppose the
it just
important
wasn't part of the and beside which, of course, he had a family of 9. He didn't work in the last, what would it be, the last 3 or 4 years of his life. He didn't work at all. He was a complete invalid.
I didn't realise he was that old. I mean, my recollection of the stories about him was the fact that he, Mum always said, oh, he died young, you know. And I when he
In
said,
the modern context, I suppose, yes, he was 63.
yeah, well,
Yes,
to
he-
her, in her mind, he died young. But I mean, my dad was only
57.
yeah when he died.
57 when he died.
So when I found that out, I was quite surprised. But
Yes. His death was accelerated, of course, by the fact that he met with an accident in his
Oh, that's
place
right.
of employment.
so
He
can
was-
you fill us in on that?
He was he was a labourer and on construction, and he one day they were blasting stone, and he was hit. I don't know what the circumstances were, but obviously he was too close to it or in the wrong position, and he was hit in the forehead. A stone penetrated his head, and probably that certainly he never worked after that.
So did he get any compensation for that
None
sort of
at all,
stuff?
no.
There was nothing.
In
like
those
that.
days?
No, nothing. That was all there was to it.
What about Grandma Geordie at this stage? What did she used to do later on?
And how did she survive?
It's a good question, Kev. An invalid pension, how she ever managed. She managed, to a large degree, I should say, with the help of her sisters, who were very generous to her.
Lynches.
No, not so, although they had, Mother had a great regard for Auntie Marion, that was Norman Lynch and the Lynch's
Mm.
mother. Her brother Peter, I don't know what he did for her. The two people that stand out in my mind were Aunt Lil, who lived at Murchison, and later at Swan Hill. She was very generous, and she used to send down hampers, and she used to send down clothes, and used to send out all kinds of things. She was very generous.
She was fairly self-reliant though, wasn't she?
Oh, very much so. A very, very
One
strong
of the
woman.
one saying, Kev, you can be poor and not look it.
Well, that was Grandma Geordie.
That was Grandma
She
Geordie.
had a capacity to do that because the children were never shabby.
Mm.
Nobody ever looked on them at school as shabby kids.
Mm.
And you never went to school without shoes.
What was her upbringing?
Her upbringing was, she belonged to a fairly superior family, and she worked for people Jews they were, but apparently also very, very good to her.
Mm.
The Keros.
And
What was in what capacity?
what did she work?
She was worked in the house, I think.
Oh,
Worked in the
right.
house and looking after the children and.
So she was a nanny type
Yes.
of thing.
And how many in her family?
There were Peter, I think, was the oldest. Her brother Peter, and I think he was the only brother. There was Mariah, Lily was down the line somewhere, and Florence. She was the lady of the house. She was the best educated, and she really was.
Was
very-
she the eldest?
No, she was the youngest, Flo. Mariah was the eldest girl, and Auntie, she was Walkie up. She was best known of all to me, and I can't remember her name, but she came second, and then there was Aunt Lily, and then this Flo. And Flo was she never did marry.
So there was
all married.
what, 5 was it? 5 children?
5. There'd have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5
yes,
children,
5.
including herself.
Yeah.
And what who did the what happened to her sisters, brothers and sisters then? Lily went up to Swan Hill.
She went from she lived at Murchison, I think it was, and went up to Swan Hill, and there she finished her life at Swan Hill. She reared her family at Swan Hill.
Oh.
The others were at
And how many
Walkley up in the
children?
valley.
How many kids did she have? Lily.
Lily would have had 4, I think. 4. 4.
And what was their name? What's
McGinniskin. Her married name was Lily McGinniskin.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Peter, what happened to him?
Peter, the eldest son, he died in the, I think it would be in the 1920, late 20s or early 30s.
Oh, did he?
Yes. Yes, he did.
Was he the eldest, was he?
He was the eldest, yes.
Oh, right.
That was Aunt Marion's, the people that owned the hotel at McKinnon.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, see, they owned the hotel at McKinnon when
And
McKinnon
so
was
where's
only a
Keith
town.
Lynch come into
Son.
it? Son, right.
Son.
Okay.
Son, there was Norman,
Yeah.
Lily, and Jack, George, Keith, and the other one that owned the hotel at Prince of Wales over at Essendon. Mrs. Smith, I don't know her name was, but
All right. And did you were you alive? Did you see your grandparents? Were you alive?
I didn't see my grandfather. I didn't see. I saw only my father's mother,
Grandma Teeny.
Tierney. Yes, I saw her.
So what was she like? Can you remember any memories of her?
Yes, but completely negative.
Yeah, I
Completely
heard it. I
negative.
heard that.
Absolutely and utterly negative. I could only remember she showed absolutely no affection
Yeah.
for her grandchildren. Absolutely none, and I don't think any of them would ever say otherwise.
But
She was just a person.
to be fair, I heard they were buggers of grandchildren.
Well, it is possible.
Yeah.
It's possible,
Be fair.
but I don't remember that part of it. I thought
Yeah.
they were all pretty gorgeous.
No.
When she got married for the second time,
Yes.
didn't she?
Yes.
Did she lose contact with the rest of the family after that?
Well, it was early in my life, Pete, and I tell you, as much as I can tell you about her, you see, it wasn't until my last birthday, 75th birthday, that I learned that, in fact, see, my uncle, after whom I was named, my uncle Jim, his name was Jim Tierney, to me. He was Jim Tierney. And my father, William George. Now, I always had the idea that my grandmother had married Tierney,
And
and
subsequently,
Tierney had died, and subsequently she married George, and my father, being the younger,
Mm.
was coerced by the old bugger into changing his name to George. Now that was not so.
No.
That was not so. She married a George in the first place,
That's right.
and my uncle
James
Jim
George.
James George,
Mm.
and my uncle James George was his name and my name coincided. I have thought all these years that my proper name should have been James Tierney,
No.
but that was not so.
No.
I was Welsh on one side and
Mm.
Irish on the other.
Mm.
So I don't know. Really, she died not long after I, became of any kind of age, old enough to recognise her even. But she just didn't. No, there was nothing there. There was nothing there, absolutely.
Yeah,
My
no,
issue-
her
Now, what about
relationship-
your mum? Do you think she had much sort of compassion and love? Did she show? I mean,
Grandma Geordie?
yeah.
Yes. Although she had lapses.
Mm.
She had lapses. Dark had a. I shouldn't say this about Phyllis, but this is the truth. Dark, when he was a young boy, had a car accident. You know, he and I it was Saturday night and we ran across to get the Sporting Globe.
How old
to
would
see
you
it.
have been?
I would have been. I would have been about 12 or 13 at that time. And Dark, naturally, 3 years younger. And we were both running across Sydney Road, or we both went up to Sydney Road, and Dark, without any stop, went across. I, of course, I suppose being the older, and we were racing one another. He just raced straight out into the street and hit a car. The car didn't hit him, really. He hit the car. But it was one of those old cars with the handle out, and it pierced his chest, and as it went forward, it pulled his chest and gaping hole in his chest. Now, I didn't know what was wrong with Dark. I don't know, people came around, lifted him off, and I ran home, which was only 100 yards away, the first house on the street.
Was this Two Moore Street?
This Toomble Street, yes. And I ran down to tell the family, and they rushed up, and we took him to the doctors, and then Mother took him into the hospital. I don't know what she used a conveyance, I don't know at all, but I stayed home, and I was waiting, not realising that Dark was seriously hurt, and when Mother got home, she bounced into me and she said, "It'll be your fault if he dies. You did it." Now that was a cruel thing to say to a boy of 13, and it was completely not in accordance with the facts at all.
No.
After all is said and done, he was 8. You wouldn't say that he was an old person, an old child, but still and all he was 8. He should have had enough gumption to stop on the side of Sydney Road, which was a busy street, to see what the traffic was there, that he ran straight into it. And now she blamed me for it, and she said that, and she never apologised. She never apologised to me formally, but, set against, she had a strange little cruel streak in it to me. Now the rest of the family wouldn't agree with this, but see, Dark wouldn't agree with him, because Dark was spoilt from the time he was completely spoilt. He wouldn't own it, and he'll probably hear this, but it doesn't matter a bugger to me. This is the truth.
Right.
He was spoiled completely, and he went out to hospital, into Children's Hospital. I was not allowed to visit him, but every morning on the way to school, I'd climb up on the fence every morning, and when he went out to Hampton to a aftercare place, I went out and I even walked there on one day from Coburg to Hampton to see him. So, you couldn't say that.
Wasn't Hampton where it was today? It was close. This is a hell of a long way.
It seemed even further, believe me.
More importantly,
Yes.
did you ever get that Sporting Globe?
That Sporting Globe. No, we missed on that issue. No, it wasn't important.
Well, Dimmer, I've had a surprise for you. We've got that issue right here.
And you'll see, Collingwood, it was a grand final and Collingwood beat the game.
No, it was Coburg in those days, Kevin.
Yeah.
It was Coburg, yes, it was really, Coburg was more important to me than I had been to Collingwood, and Brother Bill had even given me a season's ticket, but Coburg was my great love. Coburg was.
All right. So,
What about
now,
now,
so
well,
at this
no,
stage,
but
then,
leaving-
your father, was he alive at that stage?
Uh,
Did he sort of, his remaining years, were they at home or?
they were home always. He was bedridden,
Right.
you know. He
So
was always,
how long was he bedridden? He died when he was 63.
oh,
How
I
many?
would say 4 years.
Was he really?
At least 4 years, yes.
Would have put a big strain on the family, wouldn't it?
Tremendous strain, and he wasn't an easy man to get on, and wasn't an easy man at all. You know, he didn't, of course he did mellow late in his later years because he was confined, and I can only remember him in the dining room at Moore Street, Coburg, and on the leather couch, and that's where he spent his, all his days. I don't think he even went to bed at night. I think they bedded him down on that and he sat up, but that was his life. As I remember his later life, that was all there was to it. I don't even remember him leaving that room.
So what about
Toilet and things like that?
Well, I don't know. Mother would have kind of handled them. Not the family. I don't think really the family would not have done a great deal. I don't think the family. See, there was.
And do you know where your mum
I'm
and
not
your
going
dad
to look
met?
for
Pardon?
pennies down the cracks of that couch, Jeff, I tell you.
No, I don't know where they. I don't know how they came to meet because I think that he. He probably, by any standard, wouldn't have been. We would have considered that she married beneath her in marrying him. I'm only telling the truth as I see it.
And was she a snob, your mum?
No, she was not a snob. She had no reason to be a snob. But she wasn't a snob. She wasn't a snob at all.
Where did you think that stigma came from, that the Lynches were snobs? Do you think they're sort of more a refined family than the Georges?
Probably better educated. Probably, almost certainly. I don't know what their standard of education was.
Well, where would
Yeah, do you
Grandma
know-
Geordie have met him?
What about, well, just going back, can we just go, would Grandma Geordie have gone to school?
Oh yes, and she was Mum was she would have been considered at a time quite an intellect. Yeah, she could recite poetry beautifully, and she could recite it by the yard. And she
Where did she live?
Divorced her on the
Jim?
birth.
Where was she brought up?
She was born at Killallick, in the Wimmera, very close to Warwick-Nabil.
All right.
Warwick-Nabil was to be played, but
So
I've got a picture of somewhere there of the school to which she attended.
And she went to school in the country?
Yes,
Right.
at the country school in Killallick.
And where did she come, when she left Killallick, where did she go?
I really don't know. I should imagine that she went into service with the Caros.
Right.
That seems to be the link. Now,
You don't know where
else
she met her
I
husband?
don't know where or how she could have met him. I don't know. Now, one of the others may be able to tell you.
All right, well, so
I can't.
moving along in your, what do you remember of your family life, of, growing up and, did you sort of sit around,
kids?
did you sit around for a meal each night, or, was
Yes,
there...
always. Down a table that would make this look like a dwarf. Really as big as a billiard table. That was
So
our
what was
group.
the routine? What was the routine as far as the normal duties in the house? Did everyone have fixed...
Yes, very strictly, Peter. For instance, I can remember, when I look back on those days, I can remember very, very happy days. Very happy days. And this seems to be at variance perhaps of some with what I've previously said. But looking back, I certainly would not say that my childhood was unhappy. I wouldn't say that. And my mother, my mother and I must have been very close because probably I did more in the house than anybody else. And Pauline will tell you to this day that I actually enjoy cleaning things.
All right.
I will do the
Did you
washing
get
up,
it?
and I will never use a washing machine. In fact, I have been known to take
Dishwasher.
a dishwasher, sorry. We had 17 visitors and they piled them in the dishwasher, took them all out and washed them. But I don't mind that
What,
at
the
all.
visitors?
And the dishes.
God, they must have been dirty.
Yeah, but really I had my duties, and that was to
Thank you, Kevin.
mine were before I went to school in the morning, I would set the copper for the Monday wash,
Mm.
and then I would set the fire, fill the copper, get it boiling, and then when I came home of the night, I used to clean the wash house up and empty all the ashes, and that was my first job. Then I gravitated to drying up, and then washing up, and then further, in addition to that, I used to always do the vegetables. So I would come home and my job was to do the potatoes, do the vegetables, have them already in their pots so that at 5 o'clock or 5:15 they would go on, and that was my job.
Mm.
Now I never did think that it was a
Cooked on the
chore.
wood stove.
On a wood stove, yes. And I never did think it was a chore. I didn't consider it a chore or I should be out playing. I just did them as a matter of course, and that was it. They were my duties in the house, but everybody had duties down to me. I doubt very much whether it went beyond me. In other words, I don't think Dark ever had duties in the house.
Well, he was spoiled.
And, pardon?
He was spoiled.
Well, he was spoiled, and Eva was younger, and I think it might have stopped with me, and that's why I think it might have lasted longer with me. The girls by that time were starting work, and they didn't do it, and it devolved upon me to do the majority. I would say quite modestly and frankly that I did more work than any of the others.
Mm, a bit like me and my family, but
Is that the way?
Yeah.
Yes, could have been. But that's the way it was then.
So what is the actual?
What about you? Did you do much?
What?
I did actually. I had the same. I was slotted in the same level as you, Jim, in the family. I was
You
called upon quite a
quite
lot.
well. Were you really?
Yes, yes. You know.
Well, it didn't worry me, and it never worries me now. It didn't.
What about the relationship with your brothers and sisters? How was that?
Well, it was.
Can we go through one by one?
Well, yes.
Brother Bill?
Yeah, Brother Bill finished up.
And what's the age difference here again?
Well, I would be. Brother Bill was born in 07. I was born in 16. So there's 9 years difference between Brother Bill and I.
Right.
You see? Now, Brother Bill, for instance.
So
would
when
be-
you're 100, he'll be 109.
Yes, that's right. But more important, when I was 9, he'd have been 21.
Mm.
Now, Brother Bill was a cruel person.
That's inflation for you, isn't it?
He's some pun.
That's
Yes.
inflation.
Brother Bill was my
A cruel person, right? Tell me.
relationship with Brother Bill was not good.
Were you scared of him?
No, I don't think I was ever scared of anybody except the night. That's all I was scared about.
Mm.
I was scared of going from Sydney Road down to Moore Street without any light. It used to scare the hell out of me, and sleeping out in the sleep out without a light used to scare. And that's why I think today, that's what I think the tension of it gave me to do when I was sort of 14 years of age. I think so. I can't think of anything else.
Mm.
But Brother Bill, I remember he belted me one day because I used his workshop, and yet I'd helped him build it. I'd given him a tremendous amount of help. Carrying timber, I used to carry it from the Moreland timber yard, and I'd carry it on my shoulder with him. And I went in and used his, the workshop, which was really our workshop, and I left shavings on the wall, and he came and he belted hell out of me. He got me out of bed and belted me. And I said to him then, I was just telling Pauline the thing the other day, I said, Bill, that will be the last time you'll ever touch me. I swear to God, and I really mean it, if you touch me again, I'll kill you. I won't kill you with my bloody fist, but I'll kill you with anything. You sleep in that bed there and you sleep, and I'll bloody well kill you. You never touch me again. Never touch me. When I came back from the war, of course, he was a mellow man. You know, that was it. That was it. But he never
Doesn't
touched
sound like
me.
the George family at all.
No,
Does
But
it
now
all?
that's Brother Bill. But then he mellowed, Brother Bill, he mellowed, mellowed,
Marrow.
mellowed.
Plant him in the garden.
I could have a tolerance.
Listen, tell me, okay,
No,
so
but we're going
that,
down, aren't we?
that was, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that was
no,
Bill.
that's Bill. So really, Bill was a write-off as far as you were concerned.
Well, not really. I became quite fond of him as he grew older, and when he died, you know, I was out at his. He had lost Clytie, and he couldn't cope with it. They'd been married over 50 years, and he couldn't cope with it, and he had a bit of a breakdown. He finished up in Austin, and I can remember going to Austin almost every day. I would say every day. I visited him there, and he was very lonely, and I said, Bill, why don't you go up to the Repat, because they've got billiard tables there and you love billiards, go up there or go down to Ryan's pub down in Burgundy Street and just talk to the lads there. And unfortunately, I went to him, it was my birthday, and I went out to visit him at Austin, and the chap said, oh, he's gone for a walk, he's not around, and I waited and waited, and eventually I had to go because my family were waiting for me at Stevenson's Road, it being my birthday, and I left a note on his pillow, Bill, I'll be, you know, I explained the circumstance, said, well, I will be in to see you tomorrow without fail. And when I got home, the phone rang just as I walked in, I answered it, and she turned to me and said, brother, he's been killed on the road. He was actually dead when I wrote the note.
God.
Yes. So,
Was he healthy otherwise?
yes, a very wiry and healthy man. Yes, indeed. He was very wiry, but I don't think that he'd had any real sicknesses in his life, Bill. I don't think so.
And we can't sort of really pass, Bill, without you telling us that famous story about the raffle ticket.
Well, that was not perhaps so much.
Was it Bill's raffle ticket? Who bought the raffle ticket?
No. I would strongly suspect it was your mum's. The
Granny
raffle
Molly's?
ticket. Granny Molly, I think, bought the raffle ticket. But in any case, we were around the table at night, and the raffle ticket was discussed, and the thing was,
Where was it bought? What was the lead up to buying the raffle ticket?
I don't know why, what the raffle ticket was, but I became conscious of it at the tea table one night, you see, when we were all talking. Now, conversation wasn't forbidden at that big, so we were all around. There was never anybody absent. It was always, the evening meal was always there together, so that you had...
So you couldn't go much neighbours or something?
No, you had 11 people around this table, but I don't know how the raffle ticket, I don't know how it came aboard. It could have been a local parish thing, but the argument, you know, now where everybody was going to sit in the car and...
the raffle was for a car.
That was
first
for a
prize.
car. Oh yes, the raffle was a car.
And what sort of car do you know?
Pardon? It was a Chevrolet,
All right.
a real classic car, and it was going... the argument went on about, I want to sit in the front seat, and I want to sit next to Mum, and I want to sit next to, what's the name, and of course, Brother Bill, who was going to drive it, because he wasn't there, nobody else could drive the car, so Brother Bill, look, you can all get out of the bloody car. All get out of the car, quite serious. So really, we all had to get out of the car. It was a pity. It was a pity, really.
Okay, so
Did he ever win it?
Okay, next.
Like Carol and
Carol and
what's her name's
Lorraine.
car, you know, with a house.
Yes.
What colour they're going to have the paint? And I said, you didn't tell me really that they had won a house in Queensland. They happened to just bought the ticket and they're arguing about how it's going to be painted. Yeah, so that was. Now, brings you down, Brother Bill, that's enough for Brother Bill, but it brings you down, as I say, he and I were very, very close at the finish. We
Mhm.
really were. He never touched me again. Mind you, I was getting a little bit bigger and Dark was fast catching up to me and the two of us would have taken care of him. So he didn't touch us again.
Mm.
But you see, I don't know whether I was the only recipient of these kind of outbursts from Brother Bill. He was a bad-tempered man,
Mm.
bad-tempered. But as I say, at the close of his life, he was very mellowed, a very popular man, not over intellectual by any means, but a very popular person, and with me very close since the war.
And how old was he when he got married?
He would have been in the 1930s. Brother Bill would have been in his 27 or so, I suppose.
Mhm.
How many? Where's his children? How many?
Yeah.
Did he have any children?
No, none of his own. He adopted one boy, Barry, but that was the only one.
Well, where's he?
He lives
Research, isn't
over in Research somewhere,
Well, they
but
could do
we
the research.
have not seen him since. We've not seen him since
funeral.
Brother Bill, since the funeral. I would say that was the last time I saw him.
Right. And what about Clytie? Did you know her very well, or before they were married? How long did they go out for? Or
Oh yes, sometime. I never did think he'd marry Clytie, but Clytie was a very, very strange person. She changed her religion, then they both gave it away completely. I don't think she ever practiced. Her mother was very, very anti-Catholic. Clytie herself was a strange, strange person. I gave her some wool at one time to knit a jumper, sufficient to knit a cardigan or a jumper or something with several stains, and she just used it and sold it to somebody, and that was Clytie. Now, I used to have pictures around the wall, they used to frame them, racehorse and things like that, and she'd take them on the wall and take them home. And that was nothing at all. In fact, I suppose that she was a thief. She was a thief. She mightn't have thought so, but you couldn't get her past the
Klepto
fact.
Clytie.
That was Clytie.
Clytie the klepto.
Yeah, she was too, she was. But then we
The
didn't
sun
have a
doesn't
great
say this.
deal to do with her,
all right. Now, all right. Well, moving right along now to the twins,
the twins,
um,
Molly.
and Nancy. Now, what was your relationship with them like?
Well,
Brother and sister.
well, yes, no, Molly was such a darling that you couldn't have any relation other than love. Everybody loved Molly, and I say, and Nancy was probably the greater personality of the two.
Mm. And
But,
they-
she, because she was a very, very bright and a very pretty woman, Nancy, she was pretty enough to be a film star. But they were both tremendously popular, and I never did have any differences with either at all. No, not the slightest. I used to tease Molly, and at one time she bought a clock. I can still remember, it was a Friday night, and she bought this clock home, and it was a crystal clock. One of the things like this, and down, and then...
How old at this stage?
I'd have been old enough to have more sense anyway. I would have been 16 or so. Really, and I had a habit of, I'd get a cup, you see, and I'd put a string on it, you see, and I'd put it on the shelf. And then I'd say to Molly, nice cup, isn't it? And I'd give it a little nudge and it would fall off. And she'd just, this day she came home with this clock and she'd had it on lay-by. And she'd paid it off over a number of months. And she was proud of it. And I did the same with it. I put a string around it. But the weight of it caused it to round in a circle and smash up against the brick mantelpiece. So you imagine, yes. And then her favourite expression to me, mind you, with that, I went and got a job selling papers and bought a better one than ever she bought for her.
Mm.
So I paid it back. I was terribly sorry, really, for it. So I immediately got a job, and I paid her back for it. Over the years, I paid her back a lot more.
What did she say to you when you were?
She was close. She didn't cry, but she said some naughty word to me. I remember. I don't know exactly what it was, but she used to have a favourite expression with me when I teased her. She used to say, "Talking to you, Jimmy, is like pouring water on a duck's back. It goes in one ear and out the other." But that was by the eye. She was gorgeous. And Nancy, yes, our relationship was
That's
excellent.
Irish, as she'd say.
Pardon?
That's Irish, as she'd say.
Yes. But then, you get down to Eileen was the fiery one.
No, Nancy. What about
Nancy.
Nancy? Have you got anything more to say about Nancy?
Nancy. Well, I worked out at the dairy with Nancy, and Nancy was always a darling. She really was.
You worked at the dairy?
Yeah, I worked at the dairy. I worked at the dairy with Dick.
Which one?
Out at Mernda.
Mernda,
I
right.
lived at Mernda, yes.
So what did Mum used to do? What did Downy Nancy used to do?
How, in what respect?
In work-wise, in the dairy?
Look, they almost all worked in factories.
Right.
Almost all of them.
No, but in the dairy,
In the
what
dairy.
did she do?
But in the dairy, no.
She
no,
didn't work?
she was rearing her family at that time. No, she never did work.
Didn't she work for the stocking place or something?
Oh, yes,
Kaiser's.
but that was before marriage.
Yeah, that's right.
Before she was married.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. That was the factories, right?
Yeah, that was the factory, you see. And she, but she, after she got married, she didn't work again. And I can remember at the dairy,
Was
that was
Pretty common in those days that women didn't work after they were married, or?
Oh yeah, very common.
Mm.
It was rare indeed for a person to go back to a career after marriage. Very, very rare. Well, none of
Wasn't
our
till after the war.
none of our
Second war.
our girls
Mm.
ever did. They never returned to work. In fact, I don't think. Well, Eva, of course, but she was a post-war product as far as working is concerned. But the rest of them wouldn't have worked at all. Once they finished, once they married, they were finished with work altogether.
Mm.
So no. But I remember one day in the dairy, and you were never in Taronga Road, were you?
No.
100 Taronga Road. And Dick bought a horse, a mare. Excuse me. We went out to Coburg to get it, and it was in the side of the house there. The horses used to be grazed in the side of the place, not much bigger than this room. And she's looking out the window and she can't see it properly. Said, "What is it like, Jim? Is it a nice one?" And I said, "Yes, a beautiful, beautiful mare." I said, "Just hang on a minute." And I went out and got it and brought it into the kitchen. And the kitchen was a door like, you see, it was a door like that, and she's in at the kitchen. And I brought it in. When I think back on it, I must tremble and think what could have happened. It was an old house. It could have gone through the floor. There'd have been a panic. And the two children were in the kitchen now. Nance is in the kitchen and Dickie is in the kitchen. Dick's not home, of course, and Nanny is in the kitchen. And Nancy runs out underneath the horse's head with one child under each arm and looking back and saying, "You silly bucket! Only you could have done a thing like that." And I took the thing out, and it turned into the worst kicker he ever had. Completely demolished the manure pit, the brick manure pit. Completely demolished it.
I know why too.
It was a
You
really.
didn't give it a cup of tea when it was in the kitchen.
They could have been. They could have been. Oh, yes, indeed.
Mr. Red?
But there, that was my relationship with them was particularly good.
Okay, and now what about Eileen?
Eileen was a volatile character, very volatile character.
Do you
What-
think
what
we're
we
close enough to that camera as far as the voices go?
Yeah,
You sure?
yeah, plenty close.
Now,
We haven't got, you know,
Eileen
music clearing in the background.
was a very volatile character.
Mm.
Very bad tempered, very bad tempered.
Billy sort of type of character? Billy? Similar sort of personality to Billy.
To Brother Bill.
Brother Bill?
No, I wouldn't say. I would say she's much more volatile. She was red-headed, and she was, she'd have been the most unpopular of all the girls, Eileen.
Why would that,
Because of the fact that she was a very difficult person to get on with. And was to the day she died. She was a difficult person to get on with. I lived with her after the war, you know. I left for the war from 2 Moore Street, Coburg. But when I came back, my family home had been sold, and Mother was living with
Did-
Eileen.
But did your mother rented that house or did she own it? 2 Moore Street.
Oh no, that was owned. Oh yes. As
So-
a matter of fact, they owned 110 Davies Street and they owned Moore Street.
At the same time?
No. When they moved into it, they bought both homes.
Right.
So that at the time, long before the war, they actually owned Moore Street, Coburg.
Mm.
Yes. I don't know how they ever managed it, but that was another feather in their cap. They owned it.
Mm.
Mm.
So with Eileen,
Yes.
getting on to her, what
Yeah.
was the,
Well, she, as I say, she's a very volatile person, and she'd be the least popular in the. She'd be in her younger days the least popular. As a matter of fact, I would have probably the only one of the family with whom she didn't have a row. I would have been the only one, which wouldn't dare. She wouldn't. I was also a bit volatile, but I wouldn't take anything from Eileen. And you know, I often said to her, you know, when she used to talk to me quite frankly and say, so and so doesn't like me, and so, and I said, do they like anybody else? You know, they're like, oh, she said they get on well together. I said, isn't there a kind of, doesn't a penny drop there? When even when I came back from the war, said the same thing to her. She was at loggerheads with every neighbour in the street.
Mm.
Every neighbour in the street, she was a jealous person, and she just wasn't a nice person. Yet, to the day she died, I never had a row with her.
And what about Tom?
Tom was a strange character. Once again, he never changed. He never changed his faith. But he was very, very meticulous in getting his kids off to mass, always. He was, although his family was very, very anti-Catholic, he wasn't.
Mm.
He never showed any of it to me or to
Well, he
anybody.
wasn't a Catholic or?
He wasn't a Catholic,
Mm.
no. He was not, he was the only one, because he was the only one of the ones. You see, Dick wasn't a Catholic, he turned, and of course your dad was a good Catholic. But Tommy, he never did turn, and I think he might have been the only one. The rest of them were all, Clytie turned, didn't practice for a long time, then both came back to the faith very solidly before both died. Very
what about
solidly.
Percy?
Percy Always, of course, was an excellent Catholic. You know, he was a member of the CYMS of North Brunswick, the same as Jack and Brother Bill. They were Percy Hilton, Nellie's husband, was Harry was a good Catholic, and then there was that was Nellie's husband.
All right.
And,
So Tom, because my mum always said that Tom was too good for Eileen. And Mum, she always said no one could have lived with Eileen.
No, well, it's a funny thing. Yes,
Well,
you would say
That's
no
the story I got.
no one could live with
It was
Eileen.
like another couple.
Oh, I love one.
It'd be lovely, thanks.
I lived with her
Bishop,
probably longer than anybody else because I lived with her after the war
Is this interesting to you?
and until the time I got married. But I would say yes, she'd have been a difficult woman to live with. I did, there was no overt rows in the place. In other words, I didn't see Tommy. I
Dad
didn't
said
see-
that Tommy was a
Pardon?
pretty good bloke.
Yes, well,
He was a bookmaker or something, was he? Or?
he was
SP
a SB bookmaker.
He had a
But he-
beautiful house in Pasco Vale.
Pasco
didn't it?
Vale, yes, and he had provided, always provided for Eileen, but he was surreptitious, kind of sneaky bugger, a sneaky bloke,
Dictionary.
mean, a certain, a streak of meanness in him.
In what way?
Well,
When you say he was a strange sort of personality.
well, he
Surreptitious.
he was a kind of, he's a wanderer. He was a good-looking man.
Yeah.
Best looking of all
Was
of
that
us,
why he was a
I'd
wanderer?
say. Yeah, I think so. I think he was a womaniser.
We're reading between the lines
He's a
here.
womaniser, and see, Eileen had TB when I came back from the war. She had TB and she was in the sanatorium over at, where was it, Greenville,
We didn't
wherever
get
it
it till
was.
1957.
Pardon?
We didn't get it till 1957.
No, you didn't really, you didn't, that's right. Well,
No.
she had TB
Yeah, I know.
and,
The doctor wasn't too sure. Was TB or not TB? That was the question.
But she was away. You see, when I got back from the army, I went to live there. Mother lived there, Tommy was there.
And
the
why
kid-
did
and
your
the
mum
kids.
sell the house?
It's a very good question. It's
Hang
a
on,
very
in,
good que- the guy don't
Moore
know the
Street?
answer. Yeah, in Moore Street.
Why do you ask that?
Well, Jim said that when he came back from the war,
My house didn't get.
Oh,
the house
right.
had been sold.
Well, I'm sort of why I get it is that the clan had left the fold. The
Well, you see, I was over at the war and I was a prisoner of war and was fairly certain I'd come back.
was your dad gone by that stage? He was dead.
My
Father.
father, oh yes.
Right. So
But-
in other words, Grandma Geordie would have been. Who would have been in the house with Grandma Geordie at that stage when you came back home?
Eva,
So the house,
uh,
she wouldn't have had any use for the house
but-
anymore.
but then I don't really know. I can't say it. And Eva,
Eva has got
but
bad memories about
she has
selling the
very
house,
bad
hasn't she?
memories, and she can't. I thought she would have been able to tell me, but she wasn't able to tell me. And I would love to know because there were a lot of my
She
possessions
reckons it
and they
was
were
something
gone.
to do with
Well, we'll get it.
Dad,
We'll come back to it.
the house going for a deposit or security on the dairy.
Oh, but that was no, that was early in the piece. That was early when Dick first started.
Well, it was used as a deposit. It was
It was,
security.
Or collateral or something
Yes,
like that.
collateral
That's
for
what
the
she said.
loan when he moved from Dandenong Road during the Depression to he started his business at Dandenong Road, at the Dandenong Butter Factory
Where?
in Dandenong Road somewhere there, in East Melbourne, somewhere there.
You sure it wasn't on the corner of MacArthur
It's
Street
Yeah.
and High Street in
In Malvern.
Malvern?
Yeah,
I heard that's when it MacArthur.
no, in Dandenong Road. I'm absolutely certain it was the Dandenong Butter Factory in
Because that was a dairy in MacArthur Street. I
Yeah,
thought he
we-
started off at MacArthur
Yeah.
Street.
well,
Well, that's an
Now,
interesting one which we
we
can
could be
follow
right.
up.
Wait
But,
a minute, yes.
Tommy Connors lives in that place.
yes. Well, I know quite well. He moved there from there to the Cranbourne Dairy in 100 Taronga Road.
Which is the Mernda Dairy.
The Mernda Dairy, yes.
Yeah.
No,
No.
sorry, it was not the Cranbourne, it was the Mernda Dairy,
Yeah.
which later merged with
Right.
Rose's Dairy to form Cranbourne Dairies. That
Right.
was the public company.
All right.
No, it wasn't public until
Oh no, it wasn't public. I owned shares in it at the time.
51.
Oh yes.
50,
No, but that became the public company, Cranbourne Dairies, not Mernda.
No, I know.
It's
That's
a-
right. Yeah.
It was a
yeah.
Cranbourne dairy owned
But
by
when
a
he-
bloke by the name of Rose.
Rose. Yeah.
And-
By any other. No.
Yes, and it became a public
No,
company,
that's
and
not-
I had 1,000
Mm.
shares in it at that time, and I came out of it very well.
But it became a public
No,
company
not at the moment.
long after it was originally
into
bought.
those.
That's okay. you
Oh
don't
gosh,
worry.
yes. Oh dear, yes. It was many, many years after that.
Do you know the have you been down to Darling?
Do you
You
want,
want that, Peter?
Yes, please, Pauline.
Have we got that okay?
Do, do.
Have you know the Darling Road Dairy in
Yes,
East Malvern?
yes.
Well, when they had the council had the meeting, it was all pulled down and it's now parkland, right?
Yeah, yes.
You're aware of that?
No, I didn't.
Right. Well,
There.
they pulled the whole thing down
Yes.
and they sold it back to the whoever bought it sold it back to the council, right? And it was and they were going to call it a park, so they wanted to call it well, we wanted to call it the Dixon Dairy Reserve. But there was a meeting to name the park and to find out what they're going to do with it and what have you. And when they voted on the name, this guy stood up and said, well, I'm the grandson of Rose, and I want it called the Rose Park. So they eventually called it the Dairy Park, and there's a plaque there with a history.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, there's a park
Yes.
there named Richard Dixon and all that, and the roses there. So, yeah, you're
all
right.
right,
Yeah.
well, we
Okay.
got off the track a bit there.
Yes.
So, Eileen wasn't the popular girl.
No, she wasn't.
Nellie,
That was Agnes.
Agnes next,
Agnes is
sorry. Agnes,
next,
yeah,
yes,
right.
Agnes is yet next. Well, of course, Agnes is still alive, and I have to be circumspect about what I say about Agnes, don't I?
No, you have to sort of tell it from the heart because she's not going to do anything now, is she?
She will. No,
No.
no.
So you want to get your perspective. I mean, she might
Anyway,
never
these
say
days they
this.
Well-
circumspect her when you get out of hospital.
Well, well, Agnes always was and always will be and is now a snob.
Right.
Snob.
Wondered
A
whether
childish snob.
And why do you think that?
why.
Why?
Why do I think Agnes is a
No,
snob?
why?
Why? Why do I
Why?
think Agnes is a snob?
Hmm.
Well,
The
Ag-
cake's lovely,
Agnes
Pauline.
probably, certainly married the best educated man in the family, yes, I would say that. Her status was the wife of a professional.
Hmm.
I don't think anybody else had that, despite the fact that Peter's father was a richer man, had more money.
Hmm.
Richer man, but he didn't have the professional and the status that Percy Marsland had.
Mm-hmm.
I think myself that Percy fed it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
fed it his snobbery.
Right.
And although I've always had tremendous regard for Percy, I've liked him always, ever since his CYMS days, and I worked with him, of course, as you know.
Where at?
In the county game.
Oh, did you? I didn't know.
Oh yes, yes. Well, I'll come to that when we come to Jimmy. But
Yeah.
Was he here?
Peter, Peter, would you please be quiet? He, Agnes. Well, my father used to always refer to her as a little pissant. and yes, a little pissant. And I used to always be rather surprised that my father would use an expression like that. And somebody said to me, oh, but there is an ant and it's called a pissant. And I looked into the dictionary and I saw there it was a mean little ant.
Truly.
And I thought my father was right on the ball. That's right.
Because you know the famous story that I did mention to you the other night about Pete and getting the car, wanting
This
Peter,
This Peter.
you know, when he was 18, 22
Uh,
years ago.
yes, indeed.
Some 22.
22.
Mm. And he was after Gloria, his sister's car. She was
Cortina.
Cortina. and he was, all set to get it, and he was sort of excited, and because it's excited, he gets
Yes.
excited, and
The RACV had valued it at something like $200, which
Yes.
and Gloria being as what she is, she was going to sell it for that. So I was very, very happy about it.
Yes.
but Agnes heard about it and snuck in first and got it for Angela or someone.
Yes.
So Pete was very disappointed at this stage.
Yes.
And
Say the least.
but he was very close to Auntie Isle. I mean, we were all pretty close to Auntie Isle
Yeah.
because, although we can see that side, but Auntie Isle was fantastic at telling stories
Yes.
and used to just, lull us in
Yes.
with these, great
Yes.
storyteller. And it's a pity we never had her on video. We would have probably got a big enough tape. But anyhow, Pete was telling her, how Auntie Ag has snuck in and got this car,
Yes.
and Auntie Isle just felt that disappointment and just that ooh, that Agnes, she's tight, she's so tight, she'll give you the steam off her shit. Of course, we did cop the other side of Auntie Isle one day when we were about 12 or 13, and it was a Good Friday. And Good Friday hasn't never been a holiday of obligation. But in those days, Good Friday was a sort of a very morbid day.
Very morbid, though.
Yeah.
Yes, it was indeed.
And anyhow, we were up at Burke Road, and there was David and Paul Dixon, and Peter and I, and Greg Stapleton, and I think Chris Harden, and
Yes.
in the lounge room, and obviously we hadn't gone over for the 3 o'clock service to St Rock's,
Yes.
and Auntie Nancy had gone over with Auntie Eileen, and she'd walked back inside into the house, and here we were all sitting around watching television. Well, you heathens! Heathens! She went on and on. God, we
We
were.
didn't feel too good after that.
God,
Talk about feel guilty.
yeah.
But,
Have you had a piece of cake, Pete?
no, I'm right, thank you. I'm sure that's lovely.
I'll help yourself if you want
No, well,
some.
that was Eileen, I don't know.
But anyhow, all right, so getting on,
Well, with Eileen, yeah. So your relationship with her, what was that like? Even though she was,
was good. I felt sorry for her in certain respects. In fact, I was the kind of catalyst that kept them together for as long as they did stay together. So I worked with Tommy as a SP bookmaker, and of course I lived at Eilen's place, and we were, whilst I realised her faults, to me she had some virtues. I can't really name them now, but I didn't dislike Eileen. The family used to say that she was my favourite, but she was never my favourite at all. But since I lived with her longer than anybody else, it was, I got on with her quite well because she put herself out to get on with me. She wouldn't dare, she never crossed me in all my life. The nearest she came to was when Lily, when I was going to marry Lily, she was quite abusive to her. You're not good enough for him, and she went on and on, and that was the closest we came to having a real bust up. When because I knew all these qualities, and of course she didn't. Eileen didn't. Lily at that time was not a Catholic, and Eileen had realised, of course, that her family was very, very anti-Catholic, and she blew her top there, and that was the only time I think we had an open break.
how did Graham and Geordie, just getting on that, well, it's an interesting subject, I mean, because religion was a big thing in the
Yes,
George family,
yes.
wasn't it? With
Yes,
Graham and
indeed.
Geordie, and
Yes.
so how did you get on with the, or how did Mum get on with, for instance, marrying
No,
a non-Catholic
no,
or they
no,
were converted? Was there any problem?
No, never, there was never a suggestion of anti-Catholicism in our home. Never,
No, but what
never
I'm,
any. But I mean to say,
no, the reverse though. I mean, with for instance, my mum, Nancy, marrying Dad or
Yes.
going out with Dad,
Yes.
who was not a Catholic.
Yes.
Was there any?
no. She welcomed into the family straight away. When I look back, Peter, on the people that went with the girls, there were more of them, I think, that would have been non-Catholics than Catholics.
Oh, that's interesting.
And there was
When would
never.
they have met them?
They would have met them at dances, through the local CYMS, through the boy. For instance, Jack, your father, came to our place not wooing Molly, but as a cobber of bills. And so Percy Marsland came in from through the CYMS, and so met Agnes through the CYMS.
And what, he was a mate of?
He was, Perce was a mate of Jack's and Brother Bill's, and they played football together, and
All right.
you know. But there was never any suggestion, no. There was never any. My mother said to me, when I came from overseas, perhaps I could tell you the story, but I came from overseas. I had Nancy Kennedy. I had a girl by the name of Shirley Beasley. I'll have a photograph of her in there. Shirley Beasley. I had a girl, Nicholson. Her father owned the big garage in Werribee, and she was a beautiful redhead. They were beautiful people, beautiful looking people. They really were. I must say that because they really were very beautiful girls, the three of them. And I could have married any one of them. I could have married any one of them, I know that. Well, Shirley Beasley chased me out of the hospital and came, people, you know, she'd left she was the girl, Pauline, that gave me the wrong
Injection.
medication, and nearly killed me, and they sacked her immediately from the medical profession. She was one of the sisters. But
Or if you do it intentionally.
no, she didn't do it intensely, Kev. She did it carelessly, I would say, because I was in a situation where I could call for morphia wherever I wanted it. And I found that I was calling for it and I didn't want it at all. Now, this is long before the days of, you know, the modern days of drugs. And I just found it was a lovely feeling. I didn't have to have any
But that happened to a lot of
oh,
people
in the war, yes, a lot of it, because in Heidelberg, drugs completely free. You know, the people used not, the sisters used not serve out drugs. The patients used to help themselves. So they'd bring in a trolley, like as if there's a coffee trolley, and they would just zoom on it, boom, 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 all kinds of things. I never did it, but when I went to, she came in one day, this Shirley Beasley, and she said to me, oh, you've got to have a needle. And I said, no, Shirley, I don't have to have a needle. I'm not having any more needles. And she said, oh, your sister said you've got to have it. But I said, it's impossible. What would I have it for? I said, I don't want the needle. And she said, I said, you go and check with the sister. She went outside, she came back and said, yes. No, I said to her, you go and look at the chart and see. She went out and said, yes, it's on the chart. And I said, you go out and see the sister and ask her. She came back and said, yes. I said, okay, if that's the case, have it. And it was only a few minutes later, she came screaming and crying and said, I've killed you, I've killed you, I've killed you. I said, what is it? She said, it should be a man who's dying of cancer, and he died of cancer 2 days later. Now that, should they sacked her immediately?
Well, didn't she ask the sister?
But she hadn't asked the sister at all. No, there was no, I don't know, it was quite careless.
Mm.
And I don't know how it ever came about, but that's what happened. But anyway, this Shirley, she chased me all over the place. But and I went out with her a few times, but that was Shirley, Nancy Kennedy, and this other lass, Nicholson. Nicholson married an American who's a millionaire in London, so she went to America to live. And the other one was Lily Henry. you see. Now my mother said to me, Jim, you've been home 6 months now, when are you going to settle down? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't feel like settling down just yet. And she said, oh, well, you're not getting any younger.
How old were you at this stage?
I was 29. And I said, she said, I'm not getting any younger. And I said, well, over 29, I'd be 30 at that time. I said, well, I've still got 4. And she said, yes, I realise that's what I'm talking about. She said, can't you get it down to 1? And I said, well, who would you suggest? I said, who would you suggest? If you had your pick, who? She said, oh, I know who you'll marry. And I said, who will I marry? And she said, Lily Henry. Now, she was the plainest of the lot. If you lined them up, she'd be the last one you'd pick.
Mm.
You would have picked any of the others, but she
Yeah.
was the one who was right, and she knew before I knew.
Mm.
Really knew mother. She was a very astute person.
So we haven't got on to Jim yet,
Jim, no.
but and we Nellie, we finished with Agnes.
Finished with Agnes, yes.
Nellie.
Nellie, a person who could be very, very lovely and very, very disagreeable. A strange character. Nellie would have had more rows and she would have had spent more time not speaking to her brothers and sisters than any of the other members of the family. Now this used to go through the family. I'm not speaking to them, I'm not speaking to you, I'm not speaking to you. Even Nellie had gave me about 18 months of it for some reason or other. I don't know why. Don't know why, but she did. But that was Nellie's. And yet, in other ways, she was a very sweet person, very nice person, Nellie. Yes. She was, not over bright, but just the same.
And
I know they weren't an intellectual family, my family. Weren't an intellectual family.
what
And I wouldn't even call them a close family, my family. I wouldn't call them a close family one to another. There were certain members that were close to one another, but as a group of 9 people, I wouldn't say they were close families.
Even though
Well, the girls were fairly close to one another, were they? And later on?
Well, no, I
Later
would
on?
say, oh, well, yes, of course they grew, they mellowed, of course, and they grew as you will. See, I grew closer to Brother Bill, I suppose, I'm closer to...
were you always close to Doug?
Doug and I had a strange relationship.
Well, actually, we'll hold that. We'll
yes, yes,
So Nellie, we were talking about.
yes.
Now she married Harry Hilton.
Yes.
And how did you get on with Harry?
Well, I didn't like Harry and I didn't dislike him. Harry was a non-entity to me.
You weren't wild about him.
Pardon?
You weren't wild about
No, I
him.
wasn't wild about Harry, and I wasn't wild at him.
But not Nellie was.
But Nellie was. Nellie was born. See, Nellie had, as a child, Nellie had a grave illness. She had some vital stance, and she had
She had what?
Some vital
some
stance.
stance. It's a what's and she had that as a child, and also she had the fever, rheumatic fever, which ruined her heart. Now, when she married, she was warned by her doctors not to have any children. She had 6 children.
When did you have rheumatic fever? At what
As a
age?
child, I would say round about, and let's give or take a year or two, around about 11 or 12.
Yeah, and she
It
died
seems
of
to
a heart
be the
attack.
She
age
died of a heart. See, she had heart surgery.
12.
Yes, that's
And
right.
had to go back and have further heart surgery. She came out of it, and the night before, I saw her the night before she died at
Burke
your place at Dandenong Road.
Burke Road.
No,
Glen Iris.
Dandenong.
Burke Road.
No, the night before
She
she
died.
died, you're saying?
Yes.
She died at
She
Burke
died
Road.
at Burke Road.
Opposite Side Rocks.
Did she?
Yeah,
That
we
was
were
at
in-
Burke
we
Road,
left-
was it? And it was Mother's Day.
yeah.
It was Mother's Day
yes,
she
I think you're
died.
right.
Well, I saw her on the Saturday.
Now why was she at Burke Road?
because Nancy was nursing,
Looking
looking
over.
after in the post-op
Yeah.
period. And she was quite, it was a tremendous shock to me when she died, because on that day,
Yeah, she wasn't expected.
she
to.
wasn't expected to go, and she had said to me, she and Lily loved one another, but I think all the girls did. I think all the girls loved Lily.
Mm.
Yes, they would have, insofar as Agnes was capable of loving anybody, she would have loved Lily. But the rest of them did love Lily
Respect, yes.
as a sister.
Yes, they
And,
always did. Mum always.
They always loved her.
My godmother.
Yeah, that's right, your godmother. But we were on. Nellie had a special regard, and the day before she died, she said to me, "Lily has given you a great deal of happiness to me. She is a very beautiful person," and I said, "Yes, she is too, Nellie." We spoke of Lily for a while, and then I went thinking, of course, that I would see her, plenty of her in the future.
Mm.
Following day, they phoned us to say she had died. But she was a dear
So-
soul in so many ways.
Who was the first to die? Nellie.
And Nellie was the first to die.
So how old were you then?
Yeah, that's
I would be only 3 years younger. Nellie was 57. So
So
I'd have been,
Oh, she was young, wasn't she?
yes.
I mean, I can remember her. Well, it was in the house. I mean, I
Yes.
can remember those photos
Mm.
back.
Well, she was,
There you go.
I would have said
She looked a lot
57
older.
now.
I suppose in any young eyes.
See, Dick, your dad was 57 when he died.
I thought he was older than that. He was born in 1906, wasn't he? Or 1909?
Was it 1909?
1909, and
Well,
he
he was
died in
the same age as
1970, so he was 61. No, 1906.
1906.
1906, and he died in 1970, so
He was
64.
64. I didn't think he was as old as that, but Nellie, I think, was
So I thought he
57.
was, yeah, because he certainly looked old, and I mean, very hard to judge back then.
when was
Yes,
when was
exactly.
When he
Nancy born? What year?
Nancy was
1909.
born in 1909, yes.
Yes, well, Dad was 64 when he actually died. Yeah,
Was he?
yeah.
64. Well, Nellie
But he was
57.
yes. But when he had his first stroke in 1960, that was 10 years before.
That's
so
right,
he was only 54.
That's right. When he had his first stroke, he was in his 50s, his early 50s. That's
and
right.
that
That's
nearly
right.
that wiped him out.
Yes,
just about.
that's right. Yes, he wasn't quite effective after that.
No.
No, that is right.
Personality.
That is right, Peter.
So, and Harry, so you didn't have much, you weren't wild about Harry?
Not really, although I didn't have any real reason not to like Harry. He wasn't the most vibrant personality in the world, I might say.
It's funny because I remember him as that.
Yes, it wasn't
Good bloke,
big.
Harry.
Yeah,
Do you
good,
remember
good
Harry?
bloke.
Mm.
A good
Yeah,
bloke.
yeah.
Oh yes, a good bloke. Harry, he was a good bloke. He dropped his bundle completely when Nellie died. He
Mm.
just finished him. He didn't even bother to live after that. You know, he
Mm.
didn't. He wasn't over endowed with physical courage, Harry. I would say that there were a couple of occasions which I won't mention. I won't elaborate on, which showed that he wasn't exactly the
Why?
most courageous person in the world.
Well, this is for prosperity, so come on, we want you to elaborate. Why wouldn't you say he was over endowed with physical courage?
Because at one time there was a party on at our house, and Brother Bill was attacked outside the house, a house party, and it was for the CYMS.
Mm.
When you say our house, you're talking
Our
about
house in Moore
Moore
Street, Coburg.
Right.
Yes, Moore Street, Coburg. And there was somebody got into Bill outside. People ran out, and I ran out, and Nellie ran out. And Nellie, I've told Pauline this, Nellie pulled a picket off the fence and she belted the heck out of them. She wheeled it around everywhere, nails and all. And she broke it up, but Harry didn't go out at all. He stayed inside.
Mm.
Let Nellie go out. wasn't so good. And when she died, really,
Do you think you, I mean,
Robert-
it's, I mean, obviously Harry's not here to defend himself on that
No.
sort of
No.
part, but I mean, do you think that over all these years you've looked at that from sort of that perspective? Did Harry know what was going on? Did everyone, you know, did everyone inside know what was going on?
Yes, I'd already gone into the room and said, Brother Bill has a mob onto him outside.
Mm. Now, why did you all call him Brother Bill?
I don't know why. I don't know why. Brother Bill, I don't know. The girls used to call him Brother Bill.
Mm.
I'd call him Bill, but I think that, look, I wouldn't say that I would, while he was alive, I wouldn't have called him Brother Bill at
Your
all.
dad's name was Bill.
Pardon?
Your dad's name was...
My
Yeah.
dad, yes, was named
Well, that,
Bill
that
George
could have
Bill.
been
Yes, but
Brother
by,
Bill.
by the brother.
distinguishing between...
They would call him Dad.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about other people.
But by the time they called him Brother Bill, I would say my father had been dead many,
Oh,
many,
right.
many,
Mm.
years. Yes.
All
I
right.
don't know.
Maybe talking about, if they talked about...
See,
Yeah,
why did
well,
they call
yeah.
it? Why did they call my mother Grandma Geordie always?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Grandma Geordie.
Who called him
Everybody
Grandma
called him Grandma Geordie. Everybody could call Mother Grandma Geordie. Everybody that came into the
Geordie
house.
was sort of a,
What, before they...
George.
Yeah, Geordie. Called her Geordie.
Yeah, Geordie or Grandma Geordie. Grandma Geordie. They'd say Grandma Geordie, but when she had grandchildren, they always called her Grandma,
Grandma
Geordie.
Geordie.
Everybody called her Grandma Geordie. And it got to the stage where even those people who came to the house as friends, they'd call her Grandma Geordie.
Oh,
You know, it was just a firm endearment, I think, because
Geordie was
She was a-
George.
George. That was
yes, George, yes, Grandma
The baby.
George. And Grandma
One of the
Geordie,
kids.
Geordie,
Mm.
that was it.
Um,
That's
Like,
Nellie.
Hannah, my baby.
Um,
Hannah, my, 4-year-old.
yeah,
She was walking with Mary at Winfrey Road the other day, and the parish priest was walking along, and she said to Mary, "Oh, there's God Tim." So
well, they didn't elevate Grandma Geordie quite to that height.
anyhow,
Okay. Next is Agnes.
No,
No,
So we've got Nellie.
Agnes, Nellie. The next on the list is Jimmy.
Jimmy.
You know,
Jim,
Jimmy.
now, what's your full name? James.
James
Jimmy George.
Lloyd George.
James. Now Lloyd. Where did that come from?
Lloyd was the prime. I was born in
Minister of
1916, and at that time he was the Prime Minister of Britain during the First World War.
Right.
So he was in exactly the same relation as Winston Churchill was in the Second World War.
Right.
Now my grandmother, being Welsh, being
Keenan.
married to a Welshman, but she wanted me called after Lloyd. She wanted me called straight out Lloyd George. And my mother, being a bit more circumspect than she was, said, well, I'll compromise, I'll call him James Lloyd George, which has always been a great embarrassment to me. And I think
Why?
at the hospital, oh, well, of course, well, it was the same if somebody after the Second World War said, what's your name? And you said, your name was Winston Churchill. Yeah, no, it was really was. See, Lloyd George was as famous in
Oh, was his name Lloyd George?
His name was Lloyd George.
Yeah.
Oh,
actually.
sorry, I see.
It was like, it's like...
It was like his name was Lloyd George.
John Kennedy.
And of course,
Right.
this was a great embarrassment and always has
So,
been.
Jim, so we were
Yes.
talking before, your earliest memories was when your cousin
Yes,
came
Yes.
back from the war.
yes.
And what about your early school years? Do you remember your first day at school?
I do. I have a
Did you wear a
friend-
uniform?
No.
What was the school?
It was at St Margaret Mary's in Brunswick, and I
Is it still going?
Yes, it is still there. There would be 95% of them would be Italian families, of
Mm.
Italian families. There were only two in our days, the Russos and the Santa Marias.
Is that of the famous Santa Maria family?
They were cousins of Bob Santa Maria's. Bob Santa Maria's father and mother owned the fruit shop in Brunswick about But he still lives, strangely enough. He's lived all his life, 76 years, in the same house.
Has he?
Yes.
Jeff McInerney.
Jack McInerney.
What
He
is-
still lives in
Parents.
91. Well, he was born in that house,
In the
and
front
he
room.
grew up. Yes, in the front room, really. Was born in that house, and he grew up in that house. And eventually, when his father died fairly
Steve
early,
Walter.
when his mother died, he took over ownership of the house. You know, in the will he bought.
Is this
it
in
was
Brunswick, is it?
Yes, in Brunswick, Donald Street, Brunswick.
And he's
Yeah.
still there.
And he's still there. He's still there, and he's lived his whole life. There's never lived,
Married?
anywhere else. Yes, married, and had 5 children. Brought his
Oh,
wife
yeah.
there, and reared all his children there. The only change, it used to be 191, and when they renamed the house, that I told you before, they renamed them in that area.
Renumbered them.
It was he don't have to delete one number.
Oh, right.
So it's now 91 Donald Street, Brunswick.
Has he got the-
but that's what's like.
The original one he took off.
He might have. He probably hasn't. He hasn't got it on the wall, has he? I haven't seen it. I must ask him that one. I
Mm.
must ask him if he's got that number. But they're
So you're pretty good
1920.
mates.
Oh, we have
Good
been.
mates.
We have been good friends ever since.
Mhm.
Yes, very close.
So you started school with him.
I started school with him. Yes.
Now, what did you use for writing utensils in those days?
Slates. Yes, always slates. Never. I
How
don't
many?
think
How many in the class?
there would be 60.
And what? Just
With one
preps?
teacher?
Yes, with one teacher
How many grades in that?
in that school.
Yeah.
Well, there'd be.
Sorry,
eight.
in your class. In
Oh,
were there 60 preps or?
Yeah, 60 preps.
Right.
Never at any stage did I have a mixed grade.
Yeah. Right.
Not right through to, I left there when I was in grade 7.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't leave, I was expelled.
Mm-hmm.
The only person to ever have been expelled from St Margaret Mary's. Pardon?
I'm just thinking, so, but the classes would thin out, I suppose, as they got.
No, no.
There was
No,
close
no.
on 500 children at the school.
When I was at
Yes,
school,
yes.
that many kids in the
In
school.
in grade
In a
6
grade.
there were 62 children.
Yeah.
Mm.
But of course, remember this, that I never, in all the time I was at a Catholic school, I never remember a person giving cheek or answering back a teacher. I never remember it.
Mm.
I would never see a person disobey a teacher. If a teacher said sit down, the kids sat down.
Mm.
And so they didn't have the troubles that they might have today.
Mm. Oh, but I mean, they didn't have that really. When I went to school, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
In,
So
in
they
the
didn't-
primary school,
Yes,
situation
they
that you just didn't.
You didn't. They didn't have those troubles.
Mm.
You know, the most trouble you'd have a girl. There might be an occasional fight down behind the fence or in the paddock next door by the boys, or they might kick the girls' tops away, or they grab their basketball and throw it over the fence. This is kind of the most heinous crimes they ever committed.
Mm.
Putting,
And so, what
Flexible,
do you remember about your school? You were always taught by nuns, were you? Or?
Taught by nuns and lay teachers. Lay teachers in a nun in grade in the babies. Then lay teachers 1, 2, 3.
And what were they like? Were they
The
Tough? compassionate?
No, the lay teachers were good. The
Mm.
lay teachers were good, and by a strange coincidence, can we put that up there somewhere because we'll remember all that. The lay teachers were good, and when I married Pauline, they introduced me to a nun, and her name was Sister Kath Quilligan, and she taught me as a lay teacher in grade 3, and she is Pauline. She is a sister-in-law of
My eldest sister.
your eldest sister,
Mm.
Ceta.
but how old would she be?
She'd be 80. She was
She
85
died
when
last
she died.
while we
She
were
died
away.
last
She was
year.
85.
So really, she was only 10
Literally
years
remember you?
older than I. Oh yes, Oh yes, she remembered me,
Mm.
but she was a very kind person and a very kind person, a very good teacher. But my memory of the lay teachers was excellent. I think they were kind and very, very lovely.
And what about the
people.
nuns?
The nuns, a different thing. They were a mixture of Sister Catherine, kindest person you ever met, could ever meet in your life. She's a beautiful person. Sister Imelda. So many of them were lovely. And then you have Sister Laurentia, who was I don't know whether you call a women's sadist, but she was a sadist. She was a cruel, nasty person. And to tell you honest truth, she belted me one day because I played the piano at school. When she went out of the class, she used to have a pimp by the name of Mary McNamara. And Mary McNamara used to write on the board the names of those who misbehaved. It was one of my ambitions to get my name on the board as many times as I could. And yet I was one of the top people in the school as far academically.
Mm.
I was in grade 6, I topped the grade all the year. I went through the whole grade. We used to have dictation and then mental arithmetic, 10 mental arithmetic up in a little corner, dictation, and then on the bottom six words spelling. And through the whole of the year, I never did have one mistake. Didn't have a mistake. Now, there was a prize to come. And she said, oh no, I don't think you should get it. Now, I was a mile ahead of everybody. And she said, oh no, I don't think it's fair to give it to you. Another boy, he started in August, and now mind you, it was only 3 months ago. He starts in August, and he didn't get any mistakes either, so I think I'll pick it, you see. Now, one of my regrets is just keep it, give it to him. I should have said that, but you didn't say that. You thought it, but you didn't say it in those days. She went on to the board and she said, I want you to pick a number between 1 and 20. It was for a picture of the Sacred Heart, which had been handmade by the nuns, hand embroidered. And I said, I will have number 7. And number 7 won. And she said, you saw it. I said, I didn't see it. She said, we'll try again. They had another one and it was number 11. I said, number 11. She had no option then but to give it to me. But one day she came into the classroom and I was sitting at the piano playing the piano. I shouldn't have been, of course, naturally, but the kids were roaring laughing. And another nun had always said, when she watched me do dictation and I was watering the pots around Sister Catherine, and I was watering all the pots around and I'd finished, and I came back and they'd almost finished their dictation and I wrote it all out. And she was standing in front of me looking, I didn't know, and I said, the mental arithmetic and the 6 words, and I did a lot of them on the page. And she said, you'll grow up to be a genius or a fool. That was Sister Catherine, but she was so very sweet. But this other woman, she came in the middle of it, whilst all the kids were roaring, and all of a sudden I felt a real freeze. She'd made her appearance, and she descended on me, and she belted me till my feet, my backs of my legs bled, and I wouldn't cry. I would never cry. And she belted me until she was exhausted. She fell with exhaustion. And she said, you'll have to get out of this school. And she told my mother, and my mother said, well, I will take him to put him away to the brothers, and so she took me to the brothers.
And what did your mother say when she...
Nothing.
No, never did in those days. Did they?
The teachers were always right.
Mm.
They could belt you and you couldn't... and she used to do, I used to get, I had apparently bad blood circulation, and I used to get in the winter, big chilblains there. And if she'd go to belt me instead of that, she'd belt me across there till I blinked. And I'll tell you this, that same Jack McInerney, she's still alive, and I said, she lives down at Warrnambool, and I said to Jack McInerney, I think you were there, Pauline, were you? I said to Jack McInerney, would you like to go down to see her? I'll take you down to Warrnambool in the car. And he said, I will tell you sincerely, If she was dying in the next 2 hours and she was right next door, I wouldn't even go in to see her for what she did to you. I've hated it. And that man is probably the best lay Catholic that I have known.
Mm.
But that was his opinion of her. Now there were 2 of them like that, but then opposed to her were the other good ones. But they're the people that they're the nuns that I remember at that school. So I left that school then. I was kept back in grade 6 because I was only 11.
Mm.
And she wouldn't let me go up. But when I went to the brothers, they immediately put me into grade 7, gave me a test, and then I went up to grade 8.
Right.
And I got my merit when I was 11. And they wouldn't give it to me because if you got your
So
merit,
you went to the brothers, what's that, CBC or
that was,
something?
no, that was St Ambrose's. That's
Oh.
still primary school, you
Mm.
see. Primary school up to grade 8, as
Right.
they called it at that time. Beyond that, you used to go into the...
All right. So then, so where did you go from the St Ambrose?
St Ambrose, I went into the scholarship class at St Patrick's in Young Street, Fitzroy. It was the diocese scholarship class.
Mm.
And I went there, and
So what was with the scholarship? You didn't have to pay for your books, or you didn't have to pay for fees, or
you didn't pay for the books or the. There were only 50 of them in the
All the
state.
fees.
50, and I expected to win one because I topped the class all the year, and I really was very surprised when the paper came out in the morning. My name was not among them, and there were several scholarship winners, but my name wasn't there. And I went to the Brunswick Baths in the afternoon, and one of the kids came up and congratulated me. He said, "Oh, you've won a scholarship, you've topped the state of Victoria." I said, "No, not me, I haven't, my name wasn't there." He said, "Was?" He says, "Right up the top." I said, "It's not there." He said, "Yes." He said, "You go home and have a look at the first word." And when I got it, I've still got the certificate in somewhere there. Still got the certificate which shows the name George J. Lloyd, and Lloyd was my surname, but really G.J. Lloyd, that was what it was, so quite obvious me, and it was me, but I've still got the certificate, never corrected by the Education Department, but I corrected it by penning it, let's say. That was the scholarship class of 1929.
All right. And so where did you go from there?
I went from there to South Melbourne St Peter and Paul's in South Melbourne, the technical school.
All right.
Yes.
So did that become St Joseph's Tech eventually?
No, St Joseph's Tech was in
Abbotsford.
Collingwood, Abbotsford.
Yeah, right. Oh, right.
Yes.
I didn't know St Peter and Paul.
No, St Peter and Paul's went
And
out.
that just closed down a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it did indeed. That's right. And I
so
went
what did you do there? Trade.
It really was a diversity of trade, but mainly it was cabinet making.
Mm-hmm.
But you had there a wonderful teachers for things other than what's that, English, marvellous
Humanities.
brother. Yeah, no, humanities. Yes, it was a very good school. A very good school.
So where were you living then?
I was living in
Coburg.
Wall Street, Coburg, yes.
So how long would it have taken you to get from Coburg to South Melbourne?
It would take me an hour,
Right.
or so.
On the tram?
On the train to South Melbourne, and walk from South Melbourne station to to the Tech.
And what did you go through to? What?
I left there when I couldn't go any further, and then I went down to
What was that, in Form 4 or
that was what they called sub-intermediate.
Form 3? Right.
Form 3, and then went from there to the Working Men's College, which later became RMIT, of course.
All right.
Which the present RMIT was
Mm.
renamed But my father died. You see, there was still some. I think it was 4-year scholarship, but my father died, and
While you're at RMIT.
yes, while I was
working
there,
with
he died, and then I really had to leave.
Mhm.
I left school at that time because it was just.
So how old were you then?
I would have been 14.
Right. So then you started working?
No, there was no work.
What year was
So
this?
what year was that?
That was
Depression?
1930. It was
Just,
19
yeah, so
Look,
it was just.
I say it was I think it was 1932, but Eva's quite adamant it was 1930. But I don't think it fits up with.
Well, how old? What year were you born?
I was born in 16,
So that's
so you see, I was 14 in
Yeah.
30. But I don't think I was that young when I left school.
Yeah.
You see, so I then, and I've had a feeling that I started my first job when I was 16,
Mm.
and that job was in a hosiery factory because,
And just going back on that, 1929 was the stock market collapse. Would that have been sort of any sort of big news at the time?
oh yes, oh that was depression,
Yeah,
yes.
that was
Oh,
the
yes,
start
that
of it.
that was the start of the depression, oh that was, world shattering news at the time.
Did that have an immediate effect on?
Not in
Economy?
Australia. Not in Australia, no. As a matter of fact, we were one of the last countries in the world into the Depression, and we were really led the world out of it. But the 1929 stock crash, of course, shattered America
Mm.
at that time, and then, of course, it spread right throughout the whole world. Well, Australia weren't as see, there wasn't the communication in those
Yeah.
days there was now. You look at the TV of a night, and you know what the Australian dollar is, and you know what all
Yeah.
all the shares and what was up and
Right.
what was down, and the indexes and all that. Whereas it just was
No.
nobody knew about it anyway.
No, well that didn't start till the late 50s.
So what did you do at RMIT? What were you learning there?
It was more a commercial course at RMIT. That's where I first became interested in accounting.
So that's sort of a business studies type of
Yes,
course.
yes, that kind of thing. Associated with the other, but mainly what you would call commercial courses now.
So how long were you there?
I was there for only about a year. Then when my father died, I left at the end of that year, I think.
Right.
And so then you went out and worked in the hosiery.
My first job was in the hosiery.
Yeah.
And then it closed up.
That would have been
depression.
bad because it was the stocking market crash, wasn't it?
Well, it's a strange thing that it was a strange thing that the full fashion hosiery game was never felt the depression. I don't know.
Well, that's
I don't know to this day why it didn't, because they're quite expensive. So they're made of silk. There was no such thing as nylon in those days. It was pure silk, and it never did. In fact, the salary, the wages paid to them were higher than bank managers' wages. A bank manager, a good operator like Tommy Christie was, he was a good, fast, competent operator, a stocking machine operator. A man like he could earn £7.10 a week, and a bank manager would get 5 pennies, £5.
how were you paid?
Pardon?
How were you paid when you were working in the factory? Was it just a wage, or was it on productivity?
No, it was piecework always.
Oh right.
Piecework always in the full fashion game.
Yeah.
There's a difference. You wouldn't know the difference because stockings at the present time are made on a circular machine, and there's no seam down the end of it. But in the early the 20s, what they call the flapper era, they were made on a circular machine, which was later replaced by a flat machine, and they used to make a stocking, and it was a piece of material shaped, properly shaped, and then seamers used to sew it right down the back, so there was a seam right down the back, and that was the thing. You see them come back,
Yeah.
they're occasionally around now, but they're full fashion.
We
Well,
used
that
to wear
full
those right up until the war, even after the war, they were still there.
Oh,
The seams
could
in.
have been,
They
but
start to go out
yes,
after
they
the
went
war.
back to the pub, yes.
Well, we had seams in their stockings during the war.
Oh, yes, oh heavens, yes,
Yeah.
but,
So how long, when you went back to Moore Street,
when
after you left the Working Men's Club?
the Working Men's College,
College.
yes.
You worked-
That was my home at that time.
Right, you went
yes,
back to
Moore
Moore,
Street.
you stayed at Moore, how long were you there at
Well,
home for?
Well, I got I worked at Prestige for a start. Then they retrenched us from what a lot of people lost their jobs there because of the depression and because of the encroaching full fashion hosiery game on what they call circular machines. And so I lost my job, and later I got a job. Tommy Christie was working at Beaumont, and he got me a job there. And I worked 7 days a week, and I used to do the work then myself on 5 machines that 5 people did after the war. And I used to run all night when it was hot, because they had to have the steam, the atmosphere very, very hot. And I used to run around 5 machines just working all night, and eventually I collapsed inside the machine. The matter, very, very lucky not to be killed, but I collapsed, was taken home, and I was suffering then from anemia. And though I was away, I don't know what length of time actually, there was no payment of course, and I went back there and my job wasn't available to me. So after that I couldn't get a job, although I was the best educated. A lot of them, the girls were working, and there wasn't a great deal of want in the place. In fact, I can't remember a great. See, the girls were working, Brother Bill was working, and
Tommy?
yeah, well, they started to marry early in the 30s, and to leave home, but there was never. I don't say there was any actual want, but the thought of staying there with everybody else didn't appeal to me, so I went out on the track. I just left one morning and left and didn't say anything to anybody, and I was away for 6 months on the track.
Did only Early do any modelling there for her?
She did only, she had beautiful legs and beautiful knees. Probably as perfect legs as you'd possibly see. And beautiful knees, and she modelled for either Prestige or Beaumont. I don't know which of the two. I think it might have been Beaumont. She modelled, did the modelling for.
What, just
yes.
live or pictures or what?
Oh, no, well, there wouldn't have been any live then, really. It's only in pictures. It's in pictures, publications.
So all you would have seen was her legs.
There, that's right, her legs, yes.
So going back.
She wasn't physically, she wasn't the most attractive of the girls by any means.
So you left one morning
Yes,
and you
Finished.
went on the track.
we're on track.
And so what? Where did you go? What did you have
Oh,
when you left?
Nothing.
Right.
$46, yes, I did have £46
£46
in the bank. And I drew it out. I stayed overnight in town, drew it out of the State Savings Bank and took it, paid my fare to Sydney, and paid my fare to Albury and hitchhiked the
And how
rest
much
of
would that have been?
the fare,
Yeah.
only a matter of probably £6 or so.
Mm.
I left for very nearly about 38 or £67.10 or something I was left with. I went off to hitchhike from there to Sydney, and eventually spent it all in Sydney, and then eventually finished up the last night in Sydney slept in the parks, but police were coming around pushing me out of the parks, throughout the whole night, and one of them said to me, why don't you go up to the Central Police Station in Sydney, tell the sergeant there you want to bed for the night. And I went up and I told the sergeant, and he said, no, I've got a lot of baddies here, I wouldn't put you among them. And as I was walking out, he said, just a minute. He said, would you mind sleeping in the padded cell? I said, no, I don't mind at all. So he put me in this padded cell. He said to me, have you got any razor blades and knives? I said, no. Put me in this padded cell, and he said, I'm sorry, the law requires that I lock the door. I locked in this padded cell all night, but they gave me a very good meal in the morning, and then directed me on the way to that's what I said. I said I want to go to Brisbane, so they directed me on the way to Brisbane.
And how did you get to Brisbane?
Hitchhiked and walked some days I'd walk. I'd walk from dawn till after dark. I cover. I think the best day I ever covered was 40 miles, but that took me from dawn till about 10 o'clock at night. Then I used to jump the rattler. I had a chappie made friends with me in a place called Patterson. I don't know, it's up above Newcastle somewhere, but he was an expert. He was a real know-all at everything, and it devolved that the last I had 4 months left when I left Sydney, and I got to this place and he knew everything, so I said, well look, if you know everything, you go into that shop and ask them for a loaf of bread. And he came out, we didn't have the loaf of bread, and I said, well, I'll show you how it should be done. And I went in, and I said, I'll have a raisin loaf, please, and gave them the 4pence, and they wrapped it up. When I came out, I said to him, now that's just how it's done. And he said, they even wrapped it for you. But anyway, we came, he was a kind of kid who knew everything, and it was quite obvious he didn't know anything, so we were going to jump the rattler, and we waited all night. And he didn't even know which way the trains were going. So we had a fight in the middle of the street, and he went one side and I went the other, and that was the last I didn't ever mix with anybody else. And going through Kempsey in New South Wales, the whole of the people who were on the track, we didn't call them hobos in those days. I forget what we did call them, but yeah, I would never mix with them. And we got to.
When you say we?
Well, the group of them, the group of people that were around that you met on the kind of roadway, and they used to say, you'll never get past Kempsey on the rattler, and this was well known. Kempsey was dynamite. Nobody had ever got through Kempsey. So I went through to Kempsey, and when we pulled in at the station, it was a hot day, and I was in a trough of the canvas was there making the hollow, and I was there asleep.
Was it hard to jump on the train?
We got to the point where you used to be pretty agile at it, you knew what to do, and of course you knew where they were going to slow down, and you used to, well, it was always a risk. Sometimes you'd get aboard while they were stopped. If they were stopped in one of the big marshalling yards like Newcastle, you would get on while it was, stood stopped. But going through Kempsey, a voice said to me, what are you doing here? I didn't answer at all. I pretended I was asleep, and he called again. I didn't answer, and the chap who was obviously the kingpin came down. He said, what is it? And he said, there's a young bloke here, and he's, what are we going to do? And he said, leave him here. He said, at least he's got the sense to stay down. And when I got through Kempsey, I was a hero everywhere, because I was the bloke who got through Kempsey. That was about the only thing. And then when I got to Grafton in New South Wales, I was asleep on the side of the Clarence River, and I was asleep that day. The police came up, 2 plainclothes police came, pulled me to my feet and said, what are you doing here? And I, knowing that I hadn't done anything, I hadn't broken the law, I said, I was just sleeping here until you rudely interrupted me. And he said, what's your name? And I said, George, and he said, George what? And I said, no, not George what at all. I said, my surname is George. And he said, what's your full name? And I said, it's James Lloyd George. And he went, clout, punched me on the jaw and knocked me down. He said, what's your real name? And I said, my real name is James Lloyd George. I said, I have nothing whatever to do with any of the three of them. I said, it happens to be my name. And the chap was with him who hadn't touched me and was quite, I think, sympathetic. He said, I think he's telling the truth. And I said, I'm telling the truth. That's it. And the bloke apologised and gave me 2 and 6, which was a half-crown piece, an English piece. He gave it to, and I said to him, would you like to hit me again? So I went on from Grafton, and that was the only time in Grafton.
10 quid in your pocket.
It was a lot of money to me, more than I'd owned since I left Sydney, easily. But I went, that was the only night during the whole of the 6 months that I was away that I spent time in a night in or part of a night, in a camp for the Hobos. And I went in, and there was a fight started between 2 burly, one was an Italian, but I was an enormous man, and the other Covenant were wrestling around together, on their feet, fighting and wrestling, and one of them bit one of their ear off, but he bit it right off. He just threw it out and bit it right off and turned around, and I was there, and he spat it at my feet, his ear. And there was a chap over there that I used to see, he used to be a dandy. He used to always carry a suitcase, and he looked across at me and said, and I said, yeah, I was off. And I never met I was sick, and I just went and got into the local railway station that night, but I never went near, I would never slept with anybody else, so, you know.
Good out of that.
I got out of that in a very, very big hurry. So I got into Queensland and got to Brisbane, and some English, some Anglican pastor I went to ask for food. He said, have you ever thought of joining the Navy? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, I've got a very good friend in the Navy, and he will help you if you want to do it. I said, well, that would be good for me. Some other, the chap with the suit caught up with me and said, it'd be a good idea, you'd be fed, you'd be clean, you'd be clothed. And so I went to Brisbane, but the chappie said, well, you're under 18, you can't you can't be admitted here. You'd have to go back and get your mother's permission in Melbourne. So I went back to Melbourne, and there in Elizabeth Street I saw Tommy Christie, so he grabbed me and took me home. And my mother...
And that was the first time you'd been seen of by the family for 6 months?
6 months, or heard from. But when I went home... And
what about, I remember you at your 70th birthday, up in Queensland, and you hadn't...
No, on a Christmas Day 1934, it was 3:30 in the afternoon, and I hadn't broken my fast. And so because I found it difficult to beg, because I used to go into places and I would always ask, can I do anything for you? Can I do any work for you to earn something or to get some food? And there would be some of them that would be very generous, well I won't say very generous, as generous as they could be. Others would be mean. You would work for a whole day chopping wood or working or doing something around the place, and you'd work for all the day, you know, for 8, 9, 10 hours, and they would give you 2 sandwiches or something. I was never at any time asked inside a family, in a family room. But on this particular day, and I was in Stanley Street, South Brisbane, I had not eaten anything until, and it was 3:30 in the afternoon, and I thought I would go and get some food somewhere. So I called the house, and a pretty little girl of about 17 answered the door. And I was going to say, of course, you know, does Mrs. Wilson live here? And no, so I'd go off and say, do you know where she lived? No. But instead of that, I just thought, oh, I couldn't be bothered. And she said, can I do anything for you? And I said, oh, I think you know why I'm here. She said, yes, I'll get Mother. So Mother came, and that was Christmas Day, and she gave me a parcel with some plum pudding in it, and all the kind of Christmas goodies. And I went into the park, had a meal from it, left some of it, but just it was in a paper bag, and I just lay down and went to sleep. And when I woke up, the ants had kept right through the stuff, and it was right through the Christmas pudding completely. And I was faced with the proposition of
Piss ants?
either throwing it away or eating it, ants and all. And that's all I did. That's what I did. I just ate the lot, ants and all. But then, when they wouldn't allow me to join.
So it was
the
pretty
neighbourhood.
true when they said you had ants in your pants.
It could have been true. It could have been true. Yes. Yes.
So then you came back to Melbourne and Tommy Christie grabbed you.
Grabbed me. Yes, and went home. Mother welcomed me like the prodigal son. She never did remonstrate. She never did say anything. She didn't ask where I had been, what I had done. She said 3 days after I got home, I said, I'm going out for a walk somewhere or other, and she said, only one thing I ask, please come home. And that was the only thing she ever said. I told her over the years, but she never asked the question. And I never took her for granted after that. She was always a superwoman after that. I think it was a beautiful reaction. That was the Depression. The Depression practically.
And what
ended
about, your brothers and sisters, when you came home, what did they say? Where have you been?
Not a great deal. No, I can't remember the reactions of any of them at all. No, I can't.
I mean, put it
remember.
the other way, did they miss you?
Well, probably not. I don't know whether they did or not. They never did. Never did say that I'd been greatly missed. Although I don't know, my status in the family, I think, was fairly good. But it was my mother's welcome home that lived with me, because I thought she was quite justified. So I could have put something in a post, even if I didn't have the money to pay for a stamp. I could have put it in, and if they recognised the handwriting there, they could have paid for the postage. But I didn't even do that, and that was something I'm very ashamed of. It was a dreadful thing to do. But still, I got then a job with Tommy once again.
What was that doing?
That was in a full-fashion hosiery factory. And I used to earn then £7.10 a week, which was as I say, 1.5
What would the
times.
girls?
Pardon?
What would the girls have been earning at that stage?
I don't know. They were probably earning about £4.
I would all do.
But,
They were
see,
on.
I was on. No,
The
but
women didn't get anywhere near
No,
the pay men
no,
did.
but you weren't working on piecework in a full-fashion home. As I say, they didn't know what depression was. They were prospering, and they didn't know any depression. And so that people would work on piecework, and they would. As I say, I was earning £7.10 a week, which was 1.5 times what a bank manager was earning.
So how long were you there?
So I was there to the end, till I joined the army.
Which was
And why did you join the army?
But why? Well,
what year was that you joined?
well, I tell you, I joined the army. The war broke out on the 3rd of September 1939. I joined the army first on the 23rd of October. I remember saying to my mother, the night that war broke out, on a Friday night, and the ultimatum had been given, get out, or, we'll declare a state of war exists between us at 11 o'clock on Sunday. And I was in Russo's fruit shop, and my mother came in, and I said, did you see the paper? The ultimatum given. I said, now we'll have our war. And she said, what do you mean we'll have our war? I said, well, you people have talked about the Great War and all the adventures of the Great War, and now we'll be able to talk about our war. And she said, you're not serious? I said, yes, I am serious. I said, yes, I'm looking forward to it. And she said, before this war finishes, you will regret that. You'll regret it, and you'll regret it very much. And so I went into Flinders Street and I joined the army, and then I went into camp, and a fortnight later.
Was that at Puckapunyal?
Yes, at Paco, and a fortnight later I was called in to see the doctor, and he said, "Let me have a look at this leg of yours." And I had a massive varicose vein on the left knee, a massive varicose vein, the like of which I have never seen on anybody else.
Mm.
And he said, "We're going to discharge you, and if you want to come back again, you'll have to get that done at your own expense, because we haven't the facilities for doing it." He said, "As a matter of fact, you should never have been accepted." So I left the army then, and I went to see a specialist by the name of Prendergast, and he said, "Yes, I'll fix that up, I'll do that." I was admitted to St Vincent's Hospital, and they fixed the varicose vein up, and did the whole job as required by the army, and I went back then to join the forces again on the 29th of May 1940. And from there, of course, I stayed in camp from that time until we went to Royal Park, then from there to Geelong, and were chosen. Colonel came in, the Lieutenant Colonel came into Geelong asking for volunteers for anti-aircraft guns. And that was the most dangerous. The fatality rate among anti-aircraft gunners was the highest of any in the war. And so we all, so many of us joined what was the 3rd Light Anti-Aircraft.
And was there much sort of thinking about, did you know that sort of situation ended? It was a very...
He told us. And a strange thing, Kev, it is a strange thing that people were reluctant to join. He was having trouble until he told them that, and then they all surged forward. I don't know why. I don't know if it was kind of a mass reaction, but
Yeah. And so, yeah, where'd you go from there?
we went from there to Werribee for training, because we had to liaise with the Air Force at Laverton, and we stayed there until we were on our final leave. And then we went from there to catch the train off to Port Melbourne on the 29th of December of 1940. We sailed on the Mauritania.
So you spent New Year's Eve on the... You saw 41 on the water.
41 on the water. My birthday, the 4th of January, my 25th birthday it would have been. Yes, 25th birthday in Fremantle Harbour. Yes.
What shipping line would that have been? The Mauritania? The shipping line. What ship was that with? What flight was that with?
I think
Before it was
P&O.
P&O.
It was P&O, yes. But it was one of the big ones.
No relation to the, it wasn't a sister ship to the Lusitania, was it?
No,
In the
it was
First World War.
First World War, no.
I know, but they
kept
ships for a long time.
Yes, no. The Mauritania was really we went over in first class comfort because our commanding officer was commanding officer of the whole ship. And there were waiters. We slept in beds in the place. It hadn't been later. It was refitted as a troop ship. But at that time, it was making its first trip carrying troops, and our officer, as I say, was officer commanding, and we were in the best place, and we had cabin boys to look after us, and we had beautiful food, and it was lovely. We got to Colombo in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and we changed. Talk about after the Lord Mayor's cart comes the Jimmy Britt cart. We changed from there to a British troop ship called the Devonshire, and it was just the pits. It was a shocker. The food was rotten. The food was rotten. It wasn't just, when I say it was bad food, I mean that in every sense of the word. It was rotten. And we as Australians, we just wouldn't take it at all, and there was tremendous lot of trouble. They fed us one night green rabbit, and I can close my eyes and almost smell it now. It's absolutely stinky. And we threw the plates around at the cook, and we were going to hang him overboard, and he was in grave danger, that bloke. And the officer of the day, we came round, one of our officers, and he said, that's absolutely disgraceful. The English officers had passed and said, you're lucky to get that kind of business. And our code said, no, it's not good enough for my men, so they made them throw it out and replace it with bully beef and biscuits, I think it was, but at least it was edible. So we arrived at, eventually, we went through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and up to Haifa in what was then Palestine, now Israel, and we were in camp there. We did our training there, and then from there went up to Egypt, and from Egypt to Greece and to Crete.
And what do you remember about, the first sort of battle? Where was the first battle you saw in the war?
The first was in the Italians in the see, we were three different batteries. One went up the desert. No, two of us went up the desert. One of those batteries was called back to go to Greece. One went to Syria because the French had by then capitulated, and we were fighting the French. The French wanted to hand their navy over to the German navy, and we went into Syria and were actually fighting the French, and our people were fighting the French.
Were they rechargeable? The batteries.
I don't know if there was anything recharged there, but we eventually found ourselves in Crete. In Crete, on the aerodrome at Heraklion, and
Not for me, thanks.
when the parachute troops came, we shot down, our unit shot down more planes in the battle of Crete than all the other aircraft, heavy, light or otherwise, in any sphere in the rest of the war. But
Sure.
mind you, that was a one-off situation, was taken by the air, the only time, from the air, taken completely from the air. All the troops that took Crete took them as paratroops.
Mm.
So, and you can imagine, really, the transports were that slow, and the troop carriers were that slow. They were just like shooting ducks out
So-
of the sky.
And whereabouts were you captured then? What happened?
We evacuated on the evening of the 28th of May 1941, and in the morning, the Herald, the ship that we were on, was hit 3 times by Stukas, and we had to abandon ship.
Mm.
So Jack Henry, that's my brother, Lily's brother, and myself were the last 2 people on it, and I couldn't swim a great deal at all, so we had to make certain we had something worthwhile to hang on to, and we found a long pole about 20-30 feet long.
I bet you he was upset.
Series of rope loops on it, and it saved 27 men eventually, and certainly saved ourselves. But one of a petty officer, British petty officer, came running up just as we were about to jump, and he said, "Get off! There's a charge being set, and the thing is on the way down."
What?
So we got down, got off, and got away as far as we could. before it did go down, but we saw the Hereward go down. Now the official history of the war records that the Hereward, the boat on the ship on which we were, was beached on an island in Med. And we were only from here to the front door, not much further away from when it went down. Now, when we were, the point was that he said there has been a charge set. In other words, the ship itself would never have sunk. The Stukas didn't sink it. British Navy scuttled it to stop it from falling into the hands of the
enemy
Germans.
hands.
And there's a book there on there, that book, the
on
story of that regiment.
Right.
And that record, they asked for stories of all kinds, and I didn't have any story to tell. I didn't want to tell any story, but I said, make certain you get the facts about the Hereward correct, because the Hereward, the official history claims it was beached and it was scuttled. It was never sunk by Stukas, and everybody maintained it was sunk by Stukas, and I said it was not sunk by Stukas, it was scuttled by the British Navy. And
What is this in this here?
that means a prisoner,
Oh, right.
you see. And so I said it was scuttled by the British Navy, and I said, if you want, nobody would believe me, so I said, well, if you want to find out, send to Britain and ask the naval authorities there, and the word came back, it was scuttled.
Mm.
It was, a charge was set and it was sunk that way. So really, it was one on the occasion when I was right, and even, you know, it's a strange thing with memories of things like this. Jack Henry, when I said to him, you will support me, Jack, you know, he said, no, I don't remember anything about it. Yet for some reason or other, 6 months later when I said to him, Jack, how is it you don't remember? Oh, he said, I remember all about it, and told me the whole story. So I don't know whether one did it to embarrass me, I don't know. Whether he was annoyed because I told the story and he didn't, I don't know, but it's a thing that intrigues me.
So, so where were you captured?
No, I was picked out of the water. We were in the water for 6¼ hours in the Mediterranean, and the Italian MTB boats picked us up.
Right.
They took us from there to an island called Scapanto.
And how did they treat you when they picked you up?
Beautifully. Couldn't have been better. Couldn't have been better at all. That was a small island. Their food situation was grim. They were blockaded by the British Navy and had been since the start of the war.
Mm.
And it was an island
So what
called
year was this, Jess?
Scapanto. That was 1941. That was
so it's still pretty early in the piece.
May 1941, and we landed at Scapanto, and I had a pair of shorts on, that was all. Some of them had not even that. They provided them with blankets. The women were lining the streets crying, and they put us in some kind of compound, and they kept apologising because they didn't have the food cooked to take care of so many men. There were about 128 of us, and they didn't have the food cooked, and they were cooking bread and what we call pasta asciutta. That was not spaghetti, but macaroni and meat, and they cooked the bread, and each of us a loaf of bread, something like the old French loaf. But it was beautiful bread, and it would have tasted, we hadn't eaten anything since the previous day, but it was a beautiful meal, and they couldn't have been better to us.
So how long were you there?
We were only there for one day, because they couldn't sustain us, they were too small an island anyway.
And
So
then,
a submarine took us off, a destroyer took us off there at night and took us to Rhodes Island. And at Rhodes Island we were issued with clothes, and we stayed there for about a month, and there was a plague of fleas there, which were very, very distressing. Some of them got quite sick with them, but our
With
whole
fleas?
body, the fleas, the flea bites.
The fleas got quite
Affected
sick.
a lot of them quite made them quite sick.
Mm.
But we then, they took us to Bari in Italy. They took us through the Corinth Canal and around the coast of Albania and around down the south, the east coast of Italy to Bari.
Mm.
There they shot their hair off. They cut their hair off for purposes of hygiene, and they took us from there to a place called Capua near Naples, and we stayed there. That was our first permanent camp. When I say permanent, we were there for some months.
Mm.
But once again, the treatment was good. The people from the surrounding farms all came in to give us food, and we were self-fed as we were in our own home. It was really good as far as food was concerned. From there we went to a place called Bolzano, to Plato Zarco up in the Brenner Pass, and that was a more permanent camp. It had been an old brewery, but we were there for some 3 months or so, and then went down to the camp in Grupignano near Venice, Grupignano, and that was the Australian camp for the rest of the war. We weren't there for the rest of the war because in November of that year there was they wanted to cut our hair off again. The Commandant was very, very anti-Australian. He'd heard a lot of anti-Australian stories, some of them justified. They tell me that their behaviour of Australians in Syria was left a lot to be desired, and they absorbed a lot of anti-Australian propaganda, and this chap didn't like us. And we got Red Cross parcels, and he punctured them all so that we'd have to eat them straight away. And when they complained about it, he said the Red Cross Convention demands that I give it to you. Next week, he said, you'll get it spread out on the parade ground. And there was a great deal of trouble there. There were 3,000 men, and they were not in a happy mood. So he had to relent, and he did relent. But he didn't stop him piercing it. But then he wanted to cut our hair off in exactly the same way as it had been cut off at Bari. But we resented this once again, and I was challenged, and I said, well, I'm not going to have my hair cut off. And the chap said, what? Did you understand the order I gave? I said, yes, I did exactly. Now, why aren't you getting it cut off? I said, because I'm an Australian. I've been through 2 successive summers, and I had no warm clothes at all. And I said, we have no hats to wear if we get it cut off. It's at the start of winter, and as it turned out, one of the worst winters Europe had for 100 years or so, and the winter hadn't even started. It was only autumn, but there was still many feet of snow on the ground. So they forced us. They took us away, myself and followed by 22 others, to have our hair cut off. They tied us up to posts, put the handcuffs on our hands and tied us up to posts, and took the hair off, and then they sentenced us to 30 days in confinement, solitary confinement really. But then when Rome got hold of the story, they demanded we put up, since there were 23 of us, and any 6 or more that disobey a valid order, it's mutiny. And they charged us with mutiny, and I still have there the charge sheet setting it out. I've got two of them there. We'll have a look at these later, but the charge.
You're on now.
Red light is on now.
Well,
There's the charge sheet,
gosh.
charging us with mutiny.
Let's put all the names.
All the names of people charged.
So,
The head of the military tribunal, Trieste. And of George's, Jim George's name, where is it? George, James Lloyd,
Mm.
son of William and of Louisa, born at Brunswick on the 4th of the 1st, 1916. There's all prisoners of war, English prisoner of war. Yeah, born Sydney. Oh, a few of them Ankin, Humphrey, that's Humphrey.
Mm.
Yes, they were really, they were.
So, we're just running out of time on the tape, but,
Yeah.
so, okay, so then, from this,
From
we're just
there-
very hard to get these on.
From there,
From-
we were sent to prison,
Mm.
and whilst I was there, I started to get back the pains that I had as a child, duodenal ulcer. I had a duodenal ulcer at 14 years of age,
Mm.
and that went on for I received treatment, and from about the time I was 18, 19, I had limited pain. I seemed to have had it under control, and I said to the doctor that did the varicose vein, incidentally, those doctors and the medical people at St Vincent's, where it was done, wouldn't charge me anything. He was a specialist, top specialist, Prendergast, and they wouldn't charge me anything because I wanted specifically to get into the army. But the duodenal ulcer pains came back to me, and I went across to the doctor, and I pretended I didn't know, naturally enough, what the trouble was, because I didn't want to reveal that I had actually had a duodenal ulcer, and didn't reveal it when I joined the army.
Mm.
So, an Australian doctor by the name of Captain Rose examined me, and he said, I think you have, I'm almost sure you've got a duodenal ulcer. And I said, all right. I said, what do you propose to do about that? And he said, nothing. He said, you've got yourself into this trouble, you get out of it. I said, all right, I will. And the pain got that bad, of course, that eventually I reached the stage where I was quite content to just, if I could possibly get to the doctor, I could have put on a performance, that would make certain that they did send me to hospital or send me up above. And they used to cross my name off. If the Carabineers came into the jail, they would line the chaps up, and if they saw my name, they'd cross it off and send me away. They wouldn't do it. And one day, 2 Carabineers came into the
Who are the
place.
Carabinieri?
Carabinieri were the military police.
Mm.
And they came into the place one day, and I had never seen them before, and they didn't know me. So I said to the chap next to me, a bloke by the name of George Batty, I said, can I take your name? And he said, yes, you can. So I said, my name is George Batty, and that was all right. And they took me across, and there was a real explosion. And I got across there to the hospital, whatever the place was, AP something, really I put on a real performance. They were pushing me out, and this doctor Rose said to me, you've got no right to come over here, what right have you got to come over here and create this disturbance? And I pushed him in the chest, nearly pushed him over, and I said, you stay out of this, nothing to do with you. You said you weren't going to do anything for me. I said, this is between the Italians and myself. And I pushed people around. I pushed one bloke over and disappeared like a comic character in the corner, and fell down, and his rifle fell out of his arms, and people were pushing and pulling, and I didn't really care what happened because I was in too much pain, and I knew quite well it was going to go on forever. I had no hope because I had no medicine, I had no diet, and anyway, eventually, amid all the commotion, the Colonel's voice said, Silencio! Oh, shut up. And he said to me, what is your trouble? And I said, I've got a duodenal ulcer. He said, who told you? And I said, that man me. And he said, what do you want us to do? I said, I want medical treatment. Despite the fact that I'm in a jail within a jail, I said, want, the convention demands that I'm entitled to medical treatment, and I want medical treatment. And he then said, all right, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to hospital. If I go to hospital and I haven't got a junior ulcer, they find it, I'll come back here and finish the sentence. If not, I want I want the proper medical treatment. I went into hospital that afternoon in the ambulance, and it was quite obvious then that I was, the story had gone before that there was nothing wrong with her. That was a malingua, and for 3 days. They x-rayed me the first day, Monday, and on the Wednesday, and I was feeling at my very lowest. I was sitting on my bed with the shoulders over, and I didn't know what my next step was going to be. And the doctor came into the room, the most unusual thing, at 6:30 at night, and he came up on the bed and he put his arms around my shoulder. He spoke perfect English, and he said, I said, what is it, doctor? What's the trouble? He said, the trouble is we have done you a great wrong. I said, what do you mean? He said, you have ultra duodenale enormous, and we will take care of you. And they did. I stayed in that hospital for 6 months, and they were wonderful. They were really wonderful. And meanwhile, my friends had been released from jail on representation of a Catholic priest to the Pope, and from the Pope, Pope Pius XII, to the military authorities. And they sent us away on the understanding that we would never be with Australians again, and we never would. So we went from Grupignano near Venice over to a place called Chiavari over near Genoa, right on the other side. And it was from there, we were there when Italy pulled out of the war in October 1943. But before I left the hospital, the doctor made me promise, said the only one reason I'll send you out, on only one condition, that you tell the doctors in the camp when you get sick again. Immediately get the pain back, tell them straight away, go back into hospital. I went over to this new camp, and for the first week they gave me treatment, 2 New Zealand doctors, and they gave me treatment, and then one of them said to me on one of the visits, they were giving me Red Cross parcel and medication, and they said to me, where were you born? What part of England do you come from? I said, oh, I'm not an Englishman. I said, I'm an Australian. Oh, they said, bloody well, you're in the Australian forces, but you were born in England. I said, no, I was not born in England. I was born in Brunswick, Melbourne, Australia. And he said, why do you pommy bastards come out to Australia and New Zealand, haven't even got the guts to obit your pommies? And I pushed him. Very near fell. I said, listen, if I was an Englishman, especially at this time in their career, I could claim I was an Englishman, but I said I was born in Australia and was never away from Australia until I sailed away with the AIF. But they never gave me never tried me treatment again, and I could have gone home in 1942, I could have gone home or even repatriated home and should have been, and they wouldn't give me any treatment, or wouldn't send me home. And I had a chap in my unit, and he vowed, he swore a vow that if anything happened to me, he'd kill both, and he would have, he really would have. But they didn't send me home, and there were 2 people that were called out of the camp to go home as an exchange naval ratings with 1,000 in Turkey, 1,000 Italians exchanged for 1,000 British. And they were 2 of them. They said, what can I do for you when you go home? And I said, I know quite well the repack, the Red Cross had sent back reports all the time I was in hospital, and they will have those reports. The first British Red Cross place you get, tell them my predicament, tell them what the score is. And on the Saturday morning that the Swiss Commission sat, they called me in. And he said, what's wrong with you? And I told him, and he said, have you been in hospital? I said, yes. Where? And I told him. And he said to the lad across, he said, just sit down, I'll tell it, you know. The lad went across and obviously telephoned Udine, where I was in hospital, and came back and whispered to him. He called me over, he said, we'll send you home. You've got to do it. I said, we'll send you home. And within 8 days, Italy were out of war. Unfortunately, if I'd stayed another 4 days, I'd have got home. Well, it was due to leave 4 days later. So then I had to go through to Germany and go through the whole procedure of going.
So, and how did the Germans treat you?
Well, at that time, the Germans were, they had reached the realisation that they had lost the war.
And what year was this?
That was 1943.
Right.
But see, the Russians were advancing on one side, and the Americans and the British are on the other side, and they knew quite well it was only a matter of time. So their behaviour, especially with an influx of lots of Italian, they had thousands of Italian prisoners, and they took them to Germany, and those prisoners had never been cowed. They were different calibre to the others. They had never been ill-treated, and they'd never been cowed. So when the Germans tried to cow them, they came back immediately. Immediately, and I can well remember one guard, and they were all fairly elderly men, because the cream of them were at the front. And he came over. We used to have little stoves, and we used to use these stoves to cook our meals. Now that was permissible in Italy, as long as you confined it to what we call the brewing area. You see, and the Italians quite agreed with that. That was quite okay, but the Germans wouldn't. And this chap came along, these chaps were gathered around it, and he booted it. He booted the thing that was, you know, the stuff that was cooking there. He just booted it, and they got him up against the wall. And of course, that was the first time that had ever been done. There were about 8 blokes, very, very hostile, and they got him up against the wall, rifle and all. Said, don't ever do that to us again. And it was never done. The story went round and said, don't ill-treat these people, otherwise we'll have real trouble. There were 15,000 in the camp, and you know, they couldn't afford that kind of trouble. So we didn't have trouble again, and I can't. There was some amazing incidents. There was a man murdered and his body thrown in a pool in the place, and they had him locked up for days. They used to stand him, put him up in a chair, and the whole camp used to have to go and try to identify him, but naturally nobody identified him at all.
And why was he murdered, you know?
We don't know why. We don't know what his nationality is. We don't know what happened. He was just buried, but nobody identified him. But
what was the sort of was there good camaraderie in the camps?
in the camps, oh yes, I'd say yes. Fair enough. We see there would be many different nationalities there. You can imagine 15,000 men. That was the biggest camp in Germany. They describe it as the worst camp in Germany. One of the books that I've read on it describes it as the worst camp in Germany. But I'll tell you who was there, Bader, the one-legged pilot. But he was a real bastard, you know.
Was he?
Oh, he was a horrible person. Yes, he really was. He knew quite well that nobody would touch him because he was the great one-legged pilot, and he was known throughout the whole world.
Well, he had no legs, did he?
Pardon?
Didn't he have both of them shot?
Yeah, both shot.
Yeah.
Not shot off.
No, he lost him in an accident.
He joined the
That's right.
the RAF, but he was
10
legless,
legs.
you see. But you know, as far as flying a plane was concerned, he was as good as anybody else. But he wasn't a great pilot. You know, never had a great war record at all. But he was a horrible person. He would, knowing quite well that he was safe, he'd do all kinds of things to the German. The German would take it out on the poor old man down the line, you see. But they never stopped later. The fact that they were all punished repeatedly for his misdeeds, excuse me, didn't worry about it at all. He didn't go.
And what nationality was him?
He was an Englishman. But he really, not only that, his greatest crime was that the Germans would never send a wounded airman home. Didn't matter what his sickness was, what they would never repatriate him, because on the basis that if a legless man could fly, so could they. The British would have them flying, so they wouldn't let them go. So the Australians devised a scheme whereby they would exchange places with them. So if an airman got sick, he'd exchange places with a healthy soldier. Completely. There was no half measures. They changed uniforms, they changed mail, they changed everything. And then he would report sick and be sent home. And one I can remember, one was a chap in our unit. His name was Peter Garner. Now he was a member of our unit, but the RAF know him, or did know him, he's dead now, Peter, as Jack Mills, from an airman from Swan Hill. And the two of them, when he used to, after the war, he'd go to both their reunions. But that's what happened. The Australians also were responsible at Dieppe. Remember at Dieppe, the Canadians went into Dieppe on a raid and they were almost all taken prisoner. But Dieppe, the British command, against all the Geneva Convention, all the regulations of the Geneva Convention, gave each man 2 lengths of rope to tie the hands of prisoners. And that's what their prime purpose was, to get German prisoners. And the boat upon which they were going back, ship that they were going back to England, sank, and they were washed up on the shore of France with their hands tied behind their back. And the Germans then retaliated by handcuffing all the Canadian prisoners of war. And before we went into the place, their wrists were that lacerated with them after having them for years that they had great scabs and sores on them. The Australians, who really are most resilient people in the world, absolutely, they were right on the tops as far as prisoner of war. They adapted. They could, if there was anything innovative done, you could bet your socks it came from Australia, and they picked all the things, and they changed places with them too. They changed places and took them whilst they went away to Australian compounds to recover from these wounds. Yes. But that was Bader was responsible for that.
And he was in the same camp as you?
He was in the same camp.
And has that been sort of written in sort of history that Bader's responsible for?
No. As a matter of fact, I heard of one person, and I was saying about Bader, and this somebody, do you remember, Pauline, somebody said, oh, my father was in camp with him and he's not as good a man as this. And I said, well, what did you hear about him? She repeated these stories.
Did you actually meet him?
No, I never he didn't know me, and he was just Bader who was in another bed, but he was there around the same,
And
the
did he
same
have a wheelchair
hospital.
to get around? Or?
No, he had I think people used to carry him around.
Mm.
But he was a hated man, I tell you, among the prisoners of war. We didn't like him at all, and there was
So,
But then I was eventually, and this is one of the paradoxes of war, I was accepted as having had duodenal ulcer. I was taken to hospital in Germany, not to stay overnight, but to take, yes I did, one night I did stay overnight, but I was there to get all the evidence to support the fact that I had an ulcer. There's the Russians are advancing a few hundred miles away and they're killing thousands a day, and the Americans are advancing this way, and here in one case they took me to hospital 40 kilometres away to have an x-ray. It's ludicrous, isn't it?
Mm.
Here's one bloke going back to Australia. Why was it necessary for me to go back to Australia? It was so silly, the whole thing. Of course, fortunate for me, I was passed and eventually was repatriated home. Now, a strange story. When I got outside on the day that we were repatriated home, there were 143 to go home, and the Germans counted them all and made 144. And they counted them again, and there were about 30 of them all went up, and they all got 144. And I said to a pommy chap, I was in a front row, and I said to a pommy chap beside me, they won't learn to count, it has to be right like this. This was always the same as the Germans, they could never count. The Italians could go around like that and they'd be right on. If there was somebody, there was one bloke in bed one day and an officer came and he went like that. And he said, you know, we thought, oh, it's not even counting, not even proper. He said, one missing, where is he? He was in bed sick. But the Germans couldn't, they would watch them and they couldn't count up to 10. And they kept this 144, and anyway, this chap said to me, the pommy bloke said, no, there's an extra one here. And I didn't know who it was, but then they got the bright idea of lining everybody up, getting all our records from the camp and taking them out, sit at the table, everybody had to come through one break in the line, one at a time. Now they had all their gear to be taken home, the prisoners of war, and it was a hot pile as high as this roof, and you can imagine where the chap that was missing, you can imagine where he was. He was underneath it, of course. And they all got out, and of course there was only 143, and they're all slapping one another on the back. Wonderful! Of course, when we go to get our gear, the bloke pops out of the middle of, never counted. We were.
So he wasn't supposed to be there. This.
Oh no, he's escaping.
Right.
He's escaping. I didn't know him. I didn't see him until we got on the British boat going home. But they never did count us again. And we were exchanged at Gothenburg in Sweden. Germans coming one boat off the British boat and getting onto the German boat. We going from the German boat onto the British boat. We pulled out. And there was a great big Union Jack on one side of it, illuminated Union Jack, and the chap revealed himself to the captain. And the captain said, I have given my word and the word of the British government that no such thing will take place. I'm very sorry, I'll have to send you back. And because of a great outcry at this, and he said, well, explain. There is not one single revolver on this ship. This is a Red Cross ship, and he said, if the Germans realise that there's a prisoner on there, they're quite entitled, we've broken our part of the bargain, they're quite entitled to sink it. But I'm sorry, you have to go back. So he called we had 4 destroyers leading through the Skagerrak, the minefields of the Skagerrak, and he called one of the destroyers, came over, put the bloke aboard. He said, I'll give him all the food he wants, I'll give him all the clothes he wants, I'll give him anything he wants, but I have to send him back. And I was always annoyed, and so were a lot of others. We maintained that he should have been sent to Sweden, not back to Germany, because he had escaped to Sweden. He had actually escaped Sweden, and he hadn't broken any convention at all.
At that point?
At that point,
Yeah.
he hadn't broken any convention at all. He broke the convention when he got on the ship there, but not before. So he should have been not a prisoner, but an internee in Sweden.
Did you ever find out what happened to him?
Yes, strangely enough, Peter, I did. I always wondered what happened to him. Wondered what the Germans would have done to him when they got him back to Germany. But I was at a home in Ringwood at one time, and I saw a book, and it said 90 strange events from the Second World War. And when I was looking through the chapters, I saw I escaped from Germany in a Red Cross parcel. And I thought, that's intriguing. How did you get a little Red Cross parcel? How could you ever do that? So I read on, and after the first few words, I realised that it was this cove, because he had mentioned the date upon which we left Germany, and the crowd with whom he went, and it transpired that the ship that came across, and I should have known this, it wouldn't have been a German ship because we were in Swedish waters. It was a Swedish warship, and the Swedish warship took him off, took him back to, obviously I should say with arrangements with the British captain, must have had a word with the other captain, took him back to Sweden, gave him 3 months wonderful holiday, flew him back to England. He was decorated with the military medal for escaping. Yes. So that it was a strange coincidence. I should have
Mm.
learned it.
And what was the sort of the, I mean, what, with the German guards or anything like that, what was your sort of daily,
routine.
yeah,
Well, it was a strange routine in Germany. A strange, unreal routine. You could take in Lambsdorff camp. You could take a degree in anything at all from Oxford University in England. Now you could study. You could go to a room each day, and your professor would teach you all whatever you want to learn, and the Red Cross would send out the papers from Oxford University. The Red Cross would come through, the Red Cross sealed, and they would be given out, and you would sit in exactly the same way, and then they would be sent back, and they would assess them over in England. And, that could be done there. No, they had a library there.
So, alright, so then you came back from the war. So then you were sent home. Yeah, you came home.
It's repatriated home, yes.
So what year was that?
That was 1945.
Right.
1945, early 19. See, the war finished in June, and we repatriated home in the early months of 1945.
Right.
So that was 4 years you were prisoner of war?
Yeah, May 1941 to
June
well,
44, virtually.
within a few months, 3.5 to 3.75 years, yes.
So what was your initial reaction when you got back on?
Well, your dad was there.
When did you regret your mother's words? You know,
Pardon?
when did you think you sort of regretted? You know, your mother told you you'd regret the words.
Strangely enough, not at any time. I don't think it was only an adventure to me. It was only an adventure to me. It was. I never.
Did you sort of ever had anyone, you know, sort of shot down beside you, or, you know, killed beside you, or anything like that?
Oh gosh, yes, indeed. Oh yes. We had good coppers killed, but there's a feeling, you know, if you have a good copper killed, I think they used to say in the First World War, I can't say it existed with me anyway, it may have existed with some, but they say, and was often told to me in the First World War, when somebody close to you was killed, there was an initial feeling of elation. Nobody could understand that, but the feeling of elation wasn't you. You had that feeling, oh, what a relief, wonderful, he was killed. But then you would start to worry and think, what a shocking thing, he was my best friend, and he's killed beside me. Why should I feel happy about it? You're happy, not because he was killed, but because you're still alive. And I don't know,
And did you ever sort of speak to your cousin, you know, when you were 3, who, you know, came back from the war? Did you ever speak to him about his experiences in the First World War and compare them to yours? Or?
No, I didn't. He,
Not when he was 3 anyway.
that was Norman Lynch. Now, Norman Lynch was still alive.
I thought it was Powell. You said someone Powell?
Powell, no, he was dead at that time.
Right.
He was dead. But Norman Lynch was still alive. Norman Lynch.
Was Norman in the
Yeah,
Second World
Norman
War?
was in the First World War.
First World War?
First World War. First World War.
Right.
Yes, Norman was in the First World War. He was only young. He was only about 18 when he went over, and he was over in the last few months of the war. But Norman said to me when I got home, I'll put you into a hotel, country hotel. And he was quite willing to put me into a country hotel, but he wouldn't put me into a milk bar. I said, no, I don't want to go in. He said, oh, well, you know, it's either a country hotel or not at all. He said, you'd make a very good mine host, as he used to call it, going to a hotel. But Norman, apart from that, Norman never did anything for me, and we never talked about it.
Mm.
Never-
And, all right, so then you came home from the war and then, you know, what happened?
Who was there when you first came back? Who was there to greet you?
Your father.
Right.
And I feel that it was dark. I felt that it was dark, and your dad. But when I think dark at that time was in uniform. Now this chap I don't think was in uniform. I don't know, but I know quite well your dad did because I can remember him running to me and yelling at the top of his voice, "Gina!" and running toward me and picking me up physically because he was a big, strong man, Dick. And he picked me up physically as I was a little baby, and I was kicking like a little baby would, wanting to put me down because between all these codes, you know, I'm a prisoner of war, I'm a soldier, and here he is, just hugging me as though I was a little baby.
Mm.
I will never forget that. I never forget that.
And what about your mum
What's
when you
that?
came home from the war? What was her sort of reaction when you came home from the war?
Oh, they were so happy. They were all gathered at Moore Street, Coburg when I came home. Dick brought me home from the place. And,
Oh, they didn't
Walking.
go down to sort of see you, meet you?
no. Only Dick and one other person, probably Dark.
Why?